The cobblestones glistened under the gathering dusk, slick with spilled blood and the wash of twilight. Eddard Stark, Lord of Winterfell and newly appointed Hand of the King, drew a ragged breath. His hand clenched and unclenched around the hilt of his sword, a heavy longsword that trembled faintly with the echo of combat. Across from him, Jaime Lannister lay on one knee, panting, golden armor scratched and dented, his immaculate white cloak stained crimson. Half a dozen men lay fallen about them in the narrow street, some Stark household guards, some Lannister men, and the stench of death and sweat and hot steel floated in the humid King's Landing air. Ned could taste blood in his mouth. He had bitten into his cheek when Jaime's blade had thrust precariously close to his face. He could feel the ache in his ribs where another blow had glanced, leaving a bruise that flared with every breath. The Red Keep was not far, looming above the city in the failing light, an indifferent witness to the violence in its streets. Somewhere behind Ned, Jory Castle gasped in pain, still alive by some small miracle, though wounded. In the original swirl of steel and fury, Jory had been run through, but he clung to life as though by the wolf's own ferocity, refusing to let the last flicker of it die. Jaime lifted his head, sweat plastering golden hair to his brow, and for a moment the two men's gazes locked. Ned saw the faint flicker of fear in the Kingslayer's green eyes. A trickle of blood escaped Jaime's lips. His handsome face was drawn and his sword arm wavered. But there was still a measure of defiance there, the brash, almost arrogant pride that Jaime Lannister wore like a second skin. "Go on, Stark," the Kingslayer said quietly, mouth twisting in pain. "Finish it." Ned's grip tightened. For a heartbeat, he was tempted. This man had attacked him in the streets of King's Landing in open defiance, no doubt as retribution for Tyrion Lannister's capture on the road north. Jaime himself had drawn first blood, slaughtering Ned's men in short order. Now, wounded and on his knees, the Kingslayer seemed a pitiful sight. Yet Ned recalled too well that this was the man who had murdered the very king he was sworn to protect, a man whose readiness to spill blood was overshadowed only by the sardonic grin he wore in the face of any threat. Ned glanced around. The street was nearly empty of onlookers now, for the wise had fled the moment swords were drawn. Only a handful of city watchmen stood at a distance, uncertain whether to intervene. Their torches flared in the gathering darkness, reflecting off puddles of water and blood upon the cobblestones. If Ned took Jaime's head now, Robert Baratheon might well condone it. He had threatened more for lesser slights. But the realm would inevitably plunge into further turmoil. Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, would never abide such a grievous insult without savage retaliation. The Targaryens, the Greyjoys, the remains of old grudges, he knew the realm stood on a precipice and one rash stroke of his sword could send the Seven Kingdoms spiraling into war. He lowered his blade, letting it rest by his thigh. "Surrender," Ned said in a voice that carried more steel than his blade, "or your blood will finish staining these streets." Jaime's eyes narrowed. He hesitated, glaring as if the notion offended him beyond bearing, but his arm trembled. "Have it your way." The words emerged in a bitter rasp as he let his sword drop. Metal rang on the stone. "I yield." A hush settled. Ned exhaled slowly. He had won here, in the heart of the city. But victory felt tainted, overshadowed by the broken bodies around them. He turned to his guards, those few who yet stood or knelt, battered but alive. "Seize him," Ned commanded, forcing his voice to remain steady despite the throbbing in his ribs. Two men advanced to bind Jaime's hands, carefully stripping him of his sword belt. Jaime snarled but did not resist. There was too much exhaustion in his eyes. His pride had been wounded as surely as his flesh. He looked at Ned one last time as though seething with unspoken threats, or perhaps an uncanny respect that both men might have been unwilling to name. Ned surveyed the carnage. The moans of the dying lingered in the hot summer air. He knelt gingerly beside Jory Castle, who lay on his back, struggling with shallow, pained breaths. The man's blood soaked the front of his tunic, but his eyes flickered toward Ned, a faint glimmer of relief. "My lord," he murmured, voice hardly more than a whisper. "Is it done?" "It is," Ned answered softly, tears threatening at the corners of his eyes. Jory was more than a guard, he was a friend, a trusted companion from Winterfell. "Hold on. We'll get you to Maester Pycelle. Or someone better if we can find them." Jory only nodded, wincing. "I'll live. But it hurts like the seven hells." Ned squeezed his man's hand, then motioned for the guards to hoist Jory carefully. They needed to return to the Red Keep as soon as possible. King's Landing was no place to lie bleeding in the street, especially after dark. The city's shadows were full of cut purses and ill-intentioned watchers. The city watch was out in force these days, but that would not keep the wolves at bay forever, especially not for wounded men. And now they had Jaime Lannister in custody. Ned was already bracing himself for the repercussions. They made a grim procession through the winding streets, past shuttered windows and flickering lanterns. Jaime limped, his bound hands at his sides, his white cloak half torn from his shoulders. His golden armor had lost some of its luster, scratched and smeared with sweat. He wore a scowl that deepened with every step. Ned walked behind him, sword still in hand, eyes scanning the night for fresh threats. The few watchers who peered from dark alleys or from behind half-closed doors stared in silent astonishment, but none dared challenge the armed men bearing the Golden Lion as prisoner. By the time they reached the Red Keep's gates, the sky had turned fully dark, starless behind a bank of low clouds that threatened more rain. The guards at the gate gaped, stepping aside in confusion. Their lord's brother, Tyrion Lannister, was rumored to be captured. Now the Kingslayer himself was in chains. Yet no one stopped Ned from escorting his prisoner inside. Word spread quickly, like a wind-blown fire. Lord Stark had defeated Jaime Lannister and held him captive. Ned could feel the weight of eyes on him even as he ordered men to carry Jory to the Maester's chambers. The great hall lay quiet, the torches along the walls fluttering in a breeze that seeped through the open doors. It felt almost deserted at this hour, though a few courtiers whispered at the edges of the room. Ned saw them shrink back at his appearance. He did not know where Robert was, perhaps whoring in some brothel or drinking in the royal apartments, oblivious to the chaos in his own city. But Ned had a prisoner to present, and he would not wait for the king to return from his diversions. He strode deeper into the hall, motioning for the guards to bring Jaime forward. The Lannisters' knees threatened to buckle, but that mocking grin still curled his lip. It seemed more fragile than usual, though, like a battered shield. Ned wondered how many men Jaime had ever had to yield to in his life. A hush fell as the watchers recognized who they were seeing. Gasps broke the silence, and fearful glances flew about the hall. One of Robert's squires darted off, no doubt to fetch the king or the queen or both. For an endless moment, Ned simply stood, breathing heavily, the reek of blood thick in his nose, feeling the bruises all along his ribs. Time passed slowly, until hurried footsteps announced King Robert Baratheon's arrival. He strode in wearing a loose, rumpled tunic of wine-red, half-laced. His eyes were bloodshot, and Ned suspected drink was on his breath. Cersei Lannister was right behind him, her face drawn tight. She caught sight of her twin brother, bound and on his knees, and her green eyes blazed with fury. "What in all the hells is this?" Robert demanded, voice booming. He looked from Ned to Jaime and back again, as if struggling to piece it together through his haze of wine. Ned drew himself upright despite the pain. "My men and I were attacked in the streets, your grace," he said calmly, "by Ser Jaime Lannister and his men. Ser Jaime stands before you as my prisoner. He surrendered after we bested him in combat." "Attacked?" Robert's heavy brows knitted. His gaze flicked to Jaime, whose mouth twisted in silent anger. Then to Ned again, noticing the blood on his clothes, the stiffness in his posture, the injuries to his men. "Why would Jaime do this?" "You know why," Jaime snapped, still half doubled over. "Your hands saw fit to abduct my brother, Tyrion. I will not let House Stark go unpunished for that, no matter your position, Stark." His voice was as sharp as a raven's cry, but there was a deeper disquiet in his eyes, as if he realized the precariousness of his position. "Abduct?" Robert pinched the bridge of his nose. "Seven hells. Tyrion is no traitor. He's a Lannister, but so is the Queen, so are half my advisors. We need peace, not this." He glared at Ned. "Where's Tyrion?" "Last I heard, he was in your wife's custody." Ned inclined his head. "My lady wife acted on impulse, believing Tyrion was responsible for Bran's fall. I have yet to see proof or disproof. Regardless, she took him to the Eyrie to stand before her sister, Lady Lisa. I learned this but recently myself." "You had no right," Cersei hissed. She moved toward Jaime, reaching a trembling hand toward his shoulder. The guards tensed, uncertain. "My brother, this is an outrage." "The outrages are many," Ned said quietly, thinking of the men who lay dead that very evening. "We can debate who holds guilt, but I have no doubt that your brother raised steel against the king's hand in the streets. That is treason, plain as day." "Treason?" Robert echoed, looking almost nauseated. "Jaime, you bloody fool. Do you think I enjoy cleaning up after every reckless slash you Lannisters take at each other, or at the Starks? By the gods, I should, eh?" Cersei pressed closer to Robert, her voice sweetly urgent. "My love, he did it to defend our family. You cannot blame Jaime for that. I can blame him for carving up half the city." Robert bellowed, and for a moment all his inebriation burned off like fog in sunlight. Men are dead, my good friend, the hand might have been among them if the dice rolled differently. And you stand there feeding me sweet excuses. He turned to Jaime with an expression of disappointment and wrath. Jaime, you are a member of the King's Guard, sworn to protect the realm. Instead, you've spilled blood in the streets. Do not think my fondness for you will shield you from justice. Jaime lifted his chin, though still kneeling. Then do what you must, your grace. I have no regrets for defending my family. Ned could sense the tension spiraling towards something truly dangerous. Robert was a king ill-suited for cunning, though he was not a man entirely without sense. If he acted on his anger alone, it would mean a swift condemnation. But how would Lord Tywin respond if his golden son were hanged for treason? The realm would blaze like wildfire. Ned kept his silence, letting Robert weigh the implications. After a long moment, Robert breathed out a frustrated curse. Gods, you both test me. I will not have this city become a battlefield for your private quarrels. Jaime, you will remain a prisoner until we sort this out. As for you, Ned, he hesitated, looking gravely at his friend. I have no wish to see you and the Lannisters at each other's throats. We must find a way to bring Tyrion back safely and settle these accusations. I have half a mind to send men to the area at once. Ned inclined his head, though tension still coiled in his gut. He remembered all too well how lightly the Lannisters took slights against their own. And Tywin Lannister was not a man to accept the imprisonment of his golden son, especially not when the other son was also in captivity. As you command, your grace. Cersei bristled, turning to her brother. I will see you freed, Jaime. Jaime only let out a low, humorless laugh. I look forward to it, he said. Be quick about it, sister. Robert waved a hand, calling in the King's Guard. Ser Barristan and Selmy approached, looking deeply troubled by the sight. Take Ser Jaime to the dungeons, the king commanded, though his voice was unsteady. He is to be treated honorably, he is still King's Guard and a son of Lord Tywin. But see that he does not leave until I say so. Ned felt some grim satisfaction seeing the pale flicker on Jaime's face as Barristan and a pair of gold cloaks led him away. Even so, his conscience gnawed at him. War loomed on the horizon. The question was not if but when. Cersei Lannister's eyes burned into Ned's back, bright with hatred. She did not speak again, for Robert had stepped away to bark more orders, summoning the Lord Commander of the City Watch, demanding to know how his men had allowed a pitched battle to erupt in the streets. Ned glanced once more at the small retinue of his own men who had survived. Jory was gone to the Maester. Ned muttered a swift order for the rest to go see Maester Pycelle for their wounds as well, then he bowed and excused himself. His injuries needed tending, and he had no appetite for further confrontation that night. He felt each bruise and cut acutely as he made his way to his chambers. Guards parted for him, some exchanging uneasy glances. The rumors would be swirling in the corridors. The Hand had taken the Kingslayer captive. Tywin Lannister was sure to react with fury. The question was how swiftly and with what force. And what of the Queen, so near the seat of power, certain to stoke the fires of the king's anger? In his rooms, Ned's eldest daughter, Sansa, sat with her younger sister, Arya, both pale-faced and anxious. Word traveled fast in the Red Keep. They must have heard the news that their father had been attacked. Arya was the first to jump up. Father, are you all right? She rushed forward, dark hair framing her fierce little face. Is it true you fought Ser Jaime in the street? He forced a small, weary smile. I am all right, Arya. I took a few blows, but nothing a good night's rest won't help heal. Sansa rose more slowly, her eyes shiny with tears. Why would Ser Jaime do such a terrible thing? He's the Queen's brother, surely he wouldn't. It isn't very gallant. Ned sighed, crossing to a chair and settling down carefully. His ribs protested. There is much in the realm that isn't gallant, Sansa. War is the last thing I want, but the Lannisters hold themselves above the law. Jaime chose vengeance for his brother's capture. Now the king has placed him under arrest. Arya's gray eyes lit with curiosity. So you beat the Kingslayer in a fair fight? There was a hint of awe in her tone, though Arya was hardly the kind to romanticize war. She simply had a spirit that admired skill with a blade. Hardly fair, Ned said wryly, remembering the swirl of chaos, the men shouting and dying, the unpredictability of battle. We outnumbered him by a margin, and he wounded several of my men before I disarmed him. Arya's admiration dimmed, replaced by a sober nod. But you prevailed. A hollow victory if it leads to more bloodshed, he murmured, touching his side gently where it throbbed. He looked at both of his daughters, thinking of what he must do to protect them. Now you two must be cautious. The Queen will not be pleased by what's happened. I want you to stay close to your chambers and to Septa Mordane or to me at all times. Do you understand? Sansa nodded apprehensively. Arya looked rebellious but eventually acquiesced, her mouth twisting in frustration. Yes, father. Ned stroked Arya's hair briefly, a gesture of comfort. He could see the tension in her stance. She longed to be out exploring, wielding her practice sword with the butcher's boy, doing anything but cower in her room. Yet she must remain safe. The court was a nest of vipers on the calmest day, and now the snakes were surely stirred. He bid his daughters good night, sending them off with a servant who would ensure they were well guarded. Then he sank deeper into his chair, pressing a hand to his forehead. All that had transpired weighed on him like a great millstone hung around his neck. He half expected a summons from the king, or perhaps from the queen. But no one came that night. The only visitor was Maester Pycelle's young assistant, who arrived to check and dress Ned's wounds. The Maester himself, apparently, was busy tending to Jory and the other grievously wounded men. With bandages around his chest and a salve stinging along the shallow cuts, Ned finally collapsed into an uneasy sleep. He dreamed of wolves and lions locked in mortal combat, their blood seeping into the cold, hard ground of a winter landscape. And in the distance, he thought he heard a dragon's roar. He woke to bright morning light and the sound of shouting in the courtyard below. Rising with a wince, he splashed water on his face, willed his bones and muscles to cooperate, then dressed in a dark tunic with the dire wolf sigil embroidered on one breast. When he descended to the yard, he found it teeming with tension. Men were whispering of Lord Tywin Lannister's mustering of troops in the west. A raven had come early that morning bearing news that Tywin was gathering a host. Some said it was 20,000 strong, others claimed 30,000. Even the lesser figure was enough to put fear in any prudent man. Varys the spider appeared from behind a column as if conjured from thin air, his soft footsteps almost silent. He wore a sorrowful expression. "My lord hand," he greeted, folding plump fingers before him. "Dark wings, dark words, indeed." Ned met his gaze with cool caution. Varys knew everything, or so it was said, and twisted information to his own ends. Word travels fast. Faster than you can believe. Lord Tywin has mobilized his bannermen. The official cause is to punish the Tullus for abducting his son, but I'm certain the presence of a captive Kingslayer in the Red Keep will spur him on even more. It seems your lady wife's actions with the imp have fanned a dreadful flame, my lord. Ned bristled at the sly edge in Varys's tone but kept his composure. My lady wife acted out of love for her family. Tyrion was found with a dagger that nearly killed my son Bran. Perhaps it was too rash, but we cannot undo what is done. Varys shrugged, letting out a little sigh. Oh, I have no doubt there are hidden truths here. Whether Tyrion is guilty or not, however, becomes irrelevant when a father's pride and power are threatened. Especially when that father is Lord Tywin Lannister. Ned couldn't argue. The threat was real. Tywin had proven ruthless in the past. What counsel do you bring me, Varys? The spider lifted his hands in a delicate gesture. Counsel, my lord? To keep the Kingslayer alive, for one. A dead son would provoke Tywin's wrath beyond all reason. Alive, Jaime might be your only bargaining chip. And Varys paused meaningfully. Never forget that the queen stands close to the king's ear. She may do all she can to see her brother freed swiftly, perhaps by blood or treachery if necessary. You must guard Jaime with men you trust above all else. Ned inclined his head, acknowledging the sense in that. I'll see to it. Then I will leave you to your duties, Lord Hand. Varys bowed, the soft folds of his robes rustling. We will speak again soon. Ned watched him glide away, pondering how swiftly the situation had escalated. He cursed the South and its endless intrigues. If he could simply put swords aside and root out the true cause behind Bran's fall, he would, but the realm's politics had a way of turning a personal matter into a kingdom-wide feud. One thing was certain, he needed to find a resolution soon. As the morning wore on, Ned sent messages to key figures in the city watch and the castle. He entrusted the imprisonment of Jaime to a carefully chosen contingent of Stark household guards, men who had come from Winterfell with him, men whose loyalty was unshakable. He also assigned a few gold cloaks known to be honorable and less prone to Lannister gold. Jaime would be kept beneath the Red Keep in a secure chamber, not a squalid black cell but something in between, so that no accusation of maltreatment could be leveled. War loomed, but Ned would not stoke the fires unnecessarily. He also sent a raven north, informing Robb of the situation. He had not intended for his young son to be burdened with such matters, but with war rumors swirling, Winterfell must be prepared. Another raven flew to Catelyn at the Eyrie, imploring her to consider the political ramifications of keeping Tyrion Lannister indefinitely. He urged her to ensure the imp was well treated until matters could be settled. He dreaded the notion of Cat's sister Lisa doing something rash. Lisa's sense of justice was questionable. She might throw Tyrion from the moon door on a whim. That would be the match that lit the wildfire. 2 days passed in uneasy tension. The king's anger simmered, though Robert spent more time at his cups than at the council table. Cersei paraded her fury in the hallways, demanding Jaime's release at every turn. When Ned held firm, she unleashed her wrath upon the king, but Robert barked back that it was Jaime's own fault for drawing steel on the hand. That night, Ned overheard the sounds of a royal argument that rattled the windows of the Tower of the Hand. He expected dire consequences, but for the moment Robert's position stood. Jaime remained imprisoned, waiting for the realm's precarious negotiations to unfold. Finally, a messenger arrived in the pre-dawn hours, knocking on Ned's door with urgent news. Tywin Lannister had marched from Casterly Rock with his forces. Rumor had it that Tyrion was still captive at the Eyrie, though the imp had managed to secure a trial by combat. The messenger brought word that Tyrion had won that trial using some cunning or champion, no doubt, and had thus gone free. Though a fierce feud had begun between the Eyrie and the Lannisters, Tyrion's victory by the laws of the Vale should have ended his captivity. Yet it seemed Tywin Lannister still marched, possibly to punish the Tullys for their involvement or to force a resolution regarding Jaime. Ned read the parchment twice. On one hand, Tyrion's release could be a relief. It meant one less bargaining chip. On the other, Tywin might no longer be interested in negotiation. He might decide to punish House Tully, and by extension House Stark, for the insult. Ned closed his eyes, feeling the burn of a headache creeping behind them. The kingdom was unraveling before his eyes. He moved quickly to the royal apartments, where the king had already gathered the small council. Renly Baratheon stood with arms crossed, frowning. Peter Baelish lounged against a pillar, drumming his fingers thoughtfully. Varys was there, face solemn. Grand Maester Pycelle sat at the table, stroking his white beard. Cersei was conspicuously absent, though not unexpectedly. "Good you're here," Robert growled, looking up as Ned entered. The king had dark circles under his eyes, and the lines on his face seemed sharper. "We've had word of Tywin on the march. Damned Lannisters won't rest until they bathe the realm in blood." "Do we know where he's headed?" Ned asked. "Riverrun, perhaps," Renly said. "The Riverlords are mustering, or so we hear from Lord Hoster Tully's letters. If Tywin moves against the Tullys, House Stark is threatened as well, given your close ties." Baelish spoke, his tone slick. "And if Tywin's host moves into the Riverlands, the crown will be forced to respond, yes? After all, the Riverlands are sworn to the Tullys, and Lady Catelyn Tully is your wife, Lord Stark. Robert cannot allow open aggression between these great houses without appearing weak." Ned's jaw tightened. "What would you have us do, Baelish? Let the Tullys burn so the crown remains untainted by war? That would be the act of a coward." Littlefinger smiled thinly. "Oh, I am not advocating cowardice, my lord. Simply pointing out that Robert has difficult choices ahead." Robert pounded a fist on the table. "I'll not stand idle while Tywin Lannister ravages the Riverlands. He's gone too far. Jaime is imprisoned for attacking the Hand. I'd have done the same if Ned had attacked Jaime unprovoked. Now the father retaliates? By the gods, do they think me so spineless?" He stood, glaring at the arrayed council. "We'll call the banners. The crown must show its strength. Let Tywin see what it means to face the Iron Throne." The tension in the room thickened. Ned saw Renly's anxious glance. War was not a trifling matter, it could bring ruin to the entire realm. Yet how else could Robert respond? Tywin had called the banners first, after all. Does the crown even have the coin to mount a campaign? Baelish asked slyly. "We all know the treasury heir." "Damn the treasury," Robert snarled. "We'll find a way." Ned stepped forward, recalling the heartbreak of Robert's rebellion years ago. War had cost them all dearly. "Your Grace, if we must fight, so be it. But we should still attempt to negotiate. Perhaps the release of Jaime could release the Kingslayer?" Robert's eyes flared with frustration. "Then what? Tywin will see us as weak, like we can be bullied. The man all but declared war the moment you took Jaime captive." Baelish cleared his throat. "Nevertheless, if Tyrion is free, we have less leverage. Keeping Jaime imprisoned might only further incense Lord Tywin." Pycelle stirred. "The realm must not be plunged into war lightly. Perhaps we should invite Lord Tywin to parley. If we return Jaime to him, intact, mind you, he might listen. If we do so without any concessions, we gain nothing," Ned said, crossing his arms. We must ensure that the Lannisters do not threaten the Tullys. We must have their pledge that they will stand down. Robert looked between them, eyes flicking like a cornered boar. He gave a short bark of laughter that held no humor. A parley. Yes, we can attempt that, but I'll not grovel to Tywin Lannister. If he wants to talk, let him come to us. Meanwhile, I'll gather some men and prepare for the worst. That's how we'll play it. So it was decided. Ravens flew to Tywin Lannister, calling him to court for a hearing on the hostilities. Meanwhile, Robert began mustering crown forces. Ned found himself attending council after council, overseeing shipments of arms and armor, reorganizing the gold cloaks, and making arrangements to shield the city should war indeed descend. Every day he visited Jaime's cell. He would look upon the Kingslayer, ensuring he was still there, that his guards had not been bought by Lannister gold. Jaime greeted him with mocking jibes each time, though as the days turned into a week, his sarcasm took on a subdued edge. "Have you tired of lording your victory over me yet, Stark?" Jaime would say from behind the iron bars. "It must stroke your honor to hold a knight of the King's Guard as your hostage." Ned ignored the barbs. "I only come to ensure you're well. I have no desire to see you starve or rot." Jaime would laugh, leaning back against the wall with his arms folded. "Spare me your false kindness. My father is coming, and when he arrives you'll see how wise you were to keep me breathing." Ned would not let himself be baited. "Perhaps. Though I hope your father sees reason enough to stop before the realm is drowned in blood." Their conversations never ended cordially, but nor did they descend into open hatred. Ned sometimes glimpsed behind Jaime's casual front a weariness that matched his own, as if they were both men fighting the unstoppable tide of their families' feuds. But neither would yield. Too much pride was at stake on both sides. So Ned left each time with a heavy heart, no closer to resolution. Messages from the Riverlands spoke of Tywin's forces crossing into Tully-held territories, burning farms and seizing stockpiles of grain as they went. The outrages angered Ned deeply, stirring old loyalties to House Tully. Brynden Blackfish Tully and Edmure Tully were raising defenses around Riverrun. Another raven spoke of a skirmish near the Red Fork of the Trident, a savage clash leaving many dead on both sides. This, Ned knew, was only a foretaste of wider war. Then came the day when Tywin Lannister's outriders were spotted east of King's Landing, riding in force but not an entire army. Rumor said he had left the bulk of his host in the Riverlands, continuing his campaign of devastation. With a large personal guard, Tywin approached the capital as if to answer the king's summons, yet also to remind them of his power. The city was gripped with dread. The last time Tywin had ridden on King's Landing, during the reign of the Mad King, he had sacked the city in a brutal show of betrayal, paving the way for Robert's final victory. But that was a different time, under a different king. Ned stood beside Robert as they awaited Tywin's arrival in the throne room, flanked by Cersei, the members of the Kingsguard, and the small council. Sansa and Arya remained safe in their chambers, watched by Septa Mordain and trusted guards. The air was thick with tension, the torches crackling. Robert sat on the Iron Throne, looking every inch the weary monarch forced to preside over a mounting crisis. Cersei's face was a mask of cold fury. She had not seen Jaime since his imprisonment. When Tywin finally entered, the hush was absolute. Lord Tywin was a tall man, his once blonde hair gone pale and receding, his green eyes hard as flint. He wore finely wrought plate with the golden lion of Lannister on the breast, and he carried himself with a stately menace. A small retinue of bannermen trailed behind him, lords and knights from the Westerlands, some clearly bristling with hostility. The clank of armor resonated on the stone floors. Tywin approached the throne with rigid composure. He did not bow deeply, just enough to keep within the bounds of courtesy. "Your Grace," he said, his voice a measured baritone. "I have come as requested." Robert's glare was dark. "Lord Tywin, you stand accused of raising arms against the Riverlands and by extension the crown without royal leave. You have seized holdfasts, burned farmland, and put loyal subjects of the realm to the sword." "I have sought justice," Tywin answered smoothly. "My son, Tyrion, was unlawfully seized by Lady Catelyn Stark and taken to the Eyrie to face a mockery of a trial. My other son, Jaime, languishes even now in your dungeons for acting to defend his family. I could hardly stand idle while House Lannister was so gravely insulted and assaulted." Ned spoke then, stepping forward. "Tyrion Lannister was released after a trial by combat. Jaime Lannister attacked me in the streets of King's Landing, injuring or killing a number of my men. He was imprisoned for that crime, not because of Lady Catelyn's actions. Tywin's gaze flicked over him, expression cold and contemptuous. Lord Stark, your wife set this chain of events in motion. She kidnapped my son. Jaime acted as any son and brother would, yes, with steel, for House Stark left him no recourse. I do not deny that men have died. But whose fault is that? Robert bellowed, yours, for taking half the realm to war over your wounded pride. Tywin met the king's anger with an unflinching stare. My pride, as you call it, is the pride of House Lannister, a pillar of your throne. You would be wise not to dismiss it. We have shed blood in your name many times before, and we can do so again, or against you if it comes to that. A hush followed, thick with menace. Several of Robert's knights tensed, hands drifting toward hilts. Ned's own anger simmered, but he maintained control. If Tywin threatened violence here, with the city watch and the Kingsguard present, it would be open rebellion. But Tywin was not that foolhardy. He was a lion who calculated every step. Robert breathed out heavily, straining at the arms of the Iron Throne. Speak plainly, Lannister. What would you have me do? Free Jaime without consequence and let you keep burning the Riverlands? Tywin's lips tightened. I have no desire to burn the entire Riverlands, your grace. Release Jaime to me, publicly absolve him of wrongdoing, and demand that House Tully and House Stark offer recompense for Tyrion's abduction. Then I will withdraw my forces. All hostilities will cease. Ned stepped in, voice firm. You ask for recompense? It was your son who attacked me on the King's Road, unprovoked, and then in the streets of King's Landing. This is no trivial slight. If anyone should offer a recompense, it is House Lannister. Besides, men have died in the Riverlands at your command. And do not forget, Renly added from the side, that Tyrion's trial by combat in the Eyrie was lawfully won. He left with no condemnation. House Tully did nothing to him in the end. Tywin's gaze flicked dismissively over Renly. It was my men who died in that farce of a trial, he said softly. Moreover, damage has been done to my house's honor. The entire realm sees House Lannister as fair game for kidnapping and torment. I cannot allow it. Robert appeared as if he might fling the metal blade of his scepter at Tywin's head in frustration. He steadied himself. This talk of honor. It will drown us all. I will have peace in my realm, Tywin, or I will have your head. He leaned forward, voice dropping. Is that understood? A muscle in Tywin's jaw twitched. Perfectly. Then bend, Robert demanded. Withdraw your forces and we will speak of terms. Perhaps some restitution can be made for Tyrion's abduction, gold, a formal apology, something. But you will not ask for Lord Stark's head or House Tully's subjugation. That is final. And Jaime's release will come if I see your armies leave the Riverlands. Cersei moved from where she stood to address her father, her voice sharpened by desperation. Father, Jaime should be returned at once. The king. Robert shot her a warning glare. Silence, woman. Or I will do as your father did under the Mad King and seize your children as hostages for his good behavior. That brought a shocked gasp from the courtiers. Cersei's face went white with outrage. Tywin remained rigid, but his eyes flicked to his daughter. For a heartbeat, the tension was so thick that any casual spark might have ignited the entire hall. Ned held his breath, unsure if Robert had just sealed the city's doom with such a threat. But Tywin spoke slowly, measuring each word. I will withdraw my forces from the Riverlands, your grace, he said at last. But I will not stand idle should more aggression be shown against House Lannister. Once my men return to our domain, I will come again to King's Landing to see Jaime's release. If Jaime is not freed, or if any harm befalls him. Robert cut him off. I've said my piece, Lannister. Now go. Do as I command, and this realm might know peace yet. Tywin bowed stiffly, turned on his heel, and stalked from the throne room with the proud strut of a lion who had not truly been tamed. His bannermen followed, murmuring among themselves, some shooting dark looks at Ned and the king. Cersei left as well, hurrying to keep pace with her father, not sparing Robert or Ned a backward glance. As soon as they were gone, the room erupted in whispered speculation. Robert sagged back in the throne, running a hand over his bearded jaw. Bloody fool, he muttered. That man would march on the gods themselves if he thought he could make them bow. Ned approached the throne, lowering his voice. Your grace, do you trust him to withdraw? Robert gave a short, bitter laugh. Not entirely. But if he doesn't, he shows himself a liar to the entire realm, and no amount of gold will shield him from the blame. Even so, we must be prepared. Ned nodded. Jaime remains in our custody for now. If Tywin does withdraw, we should I will consider returning Jaime once Tywin's men leave the Riverlands and make reparations to the farmers who were burned out of house and home. I'll not have it said that a Lannister can simply buy back the lives he's taken. Robert stood, suddenly looking weary. We'll see what Tywin does. That evening, Ned found himself pacing the courtyard, battered by conflicting emotions. Every step in this southern Game of Thrones felt like a misstep. Yet for the moment, Robert's strong stance might hold the realm together. Ned took no joy in keeping Jaime as a hostage, but if it spared the Riverlands from further devastation, it was worth it. War had not been averted, merely postponed, but each day of peace was a gift. He remembered Jory Castle, slowly recovering from his wound, and the men who had died outright. He thought of how close he had come to losing Arya or Sansa in these dangerous times. He paused by a weirwood tree in the courtyard's small godwood, placing a hand on its pale trunk. He prayed silently for the wisdom to steer House Stark through the tumult to come. Word came a fortnight later that Tywin's forces had indeed begun to withdraw from parts of the Riverlands, though not without securing some spoils and continuing a show of force. Skirmishes still erupted, but the scale of conflict lessened. The Tullys took heart, reasserting their hold on the region with help from local bannermen. Meanwhile, tension in King's Landing remained high. Cersei Lannister refused to speak to Ned and rarely to Robert. Rumor had it she was corresponding with her father daily, urging him to break off all negotiations until Jaime was free. But Tywin seemed to have his own plan, one that required a temporary cooling of hostilities. For Jaime, the days passed in his cell. Ned visited at times, fulfilling the function of jailer more than confessor, but occasionally the Kingslayer offered up a cynical remark or two. Once, Ned found Jaime standing by the narrow window slit, gazing out at the city. Jaime turned at Ned's footsteps. "Lord Stark," he greeted, voice echoing slightly in the stone chamber. "Come to see if I've hung myself?" Ned ignored the jibe. "I come to treat you as a prisoner of status, Sir Jaime. If you need more blankets, or better fare, say so." Jaime gave a bitter chuckle. "What I need is a good horse and an open gate. Barring that, some decent wine would be welcome. The swill you've been sending is fit for stable boys." Ned allowed a curt nod. "I'll see that you get something better. But you remain a prisoner until Lord Tywin's forces withdraw fully and cease harassing the Tully lands. So you hold me hostage for your wife's offense." Jaime ran a hand through his hair, grown longer in confinement. "Does that sit well on your precious honor, Stark?" Ned's lips thinned. "I do what I must to protect the realm. There's little honor in war, but if I can prevent a bigger one, so be it." Jaime studied him for a moment as if trying to read behind Ned's grim facade. At last he shrugged. "Do as you like. In my experience, it's all a game, only the pieces differ." Ned turned and left without another word, unsettled by the sense that Jaime saw their mutual predicament as part of some grand, twisted dance that neither could escape. Despite Tywin's partial withdrawal, the realm's nobles grew restless. Some whispered that Tywin was merely consolidating his forces for a larger strike. Others claimed the Lannisters would soon turn their wrath southward or even attempt to depose Robert. Tension swirled like a dark cloud over King's Landing, so thick it was almost suffocating. Ned tried to focus on the tasks at hand, investigating the crown's finances, pursuing the truth of Jon Arryn's last days, and seeking any clue that might link the attempt on Bran's life to the Lannisters or someone else. But always, the matter of Jaime Lannister overshadowed everything. One morning, a raven arrived bearing Tywin's sigil, the Lion. Ned and Robert opened the missive at the council table in the presence of Renly, Baelish, Varys, and Pycelle. Tywin demanded a full exchange of hostages. Jaime for a Tully hostage as well as a formal apology for the kidnapping of Tyrion. He also insisted upon reimbursement for the cost of mobilizing his forces, which he claimed was forced by the Starks. The letter was penned in unyielding terms. Robert stared at it, outraged. "He's mad. First he draws steel on my realm, now he wants money for the trouble." Renly shook his head in disbelief. "It's almost admirable in its audacity." Ned considered carefully. He doesn't truly expect to gain all that, but by asking for more, he hopes for at least some concessions. Baelish smirked. "It's how negotiations often work, Lord Stark. You overshoot, then accept the lesser demands as a compromise." Ned's shoulders tensed. He wants a hostage from House Tully. "My wife's family." "Who would that be?" "Edmure, the heir to Riverrun. He might accept the Blackfish or even Hoster Tully himself," Baelish said, half serious, half mocking. "Though Hoster is old and in ill health, so perhaps Edmure is more valuable. Perhaps even your wife or daughters." Ned shot him a look that could have frozen the narrow sea. "Never." Robert ended the discussion with a scowl. I'll not throw the Tullus to the lion's jaws. If they choose to give a hostage, it is their choice, not mine. As for paying Tywin's cost, he can go piss in a cup. I won't pay him a copper for raising an army without my leave. Write him back. Tell him if he truly wants to secure Jaime's release, he'll come here in person to talk terms, unarmed with a minimal retinue. Then we'll see. And so another raven was sent. Days stretched into weeks. The kingdom hung in a precarious balance, with letters flying back and forth but no swift resolution. Bits of news arrived daily from the Riverlands. This holdfast spared, that village raided by Lannister outriders. But Tywin did not fully commit to a new offensive, nor did he fully retreat to the Westerlands. It was a slow, grinding stalemate, and Jaime Lannister remained in his cell, polishing his sarcasm like a gem. At times, Ned wondered if the man had begun to doubt his father's plan. In those weeks, Sansa and Arya grew restless. Sansa yearned for the courtly life she had expected, free of such grim tensions. Arya bristled at being confined, sneaking off whenever she could to practice with Syrio Farrell, her dancing master. Ned allowed it. He saw that discipline did Arya some good, and Syrio was the best swordsman in the city. At least she would know how to defend herself. The memory of the fight in the streets, Jory's near-death, haunted Ned still. One evening, while Ned was poring over dusty ledgers in the Solar, cross-referencing the Crown's debts with the expenditures Robert insisted upon for a great tournament, he heard soft footsteps. He looked up to see Arya slip in, quiet as a mouse. She had grown more adept at stealth, evidently. "Father," she said, not quite meeting his eye. He set aside the ledger, leaning back. "Arya, should you be in bed?" She shrugged. "I couldn't sleep. My head's too full of everything. She hesitated, chewing her lip. "I don't like this city. I want to go home." Ned felt a pang. He rose, crossing to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know, little one, but we cannot. The king needs me, and I must see this through." Arya looked at him intently. "When you fought Jaime Lannister, were you scared?" A faint smile touched Ned's lips. "I was. War is not glory, Arya. It's blood and fear. If you ever must fight, know that fear is natural. Keeps you aware." She nodded, staring at her feet. "But you fought for us, for the family, even though it's scary." He rested his other hand on her other shoulder. "Yes, I did." She seemed to draw a lesson from that, standing a bit taller. "Then I'll do the same if I have to," she said, solemn as a sworn knight. Ned felt a stirring of both pride and apprehension. Arya had a wolf's heart, and the world was always hardest for such as her. Time advanced day by day. At last, Tywin Lannister arrived in King's Landing again, unarmed but with a large escort posted just outside the city gates. He came to the Red Keep to parley directly with Robert, and Ned was present. The scene in the throne room played out with tension but less hostility than before. Tywin demanded Jaime's release as a sign of good faith. Robert insisted on the complete withdrawal of Tywin's men from the Riverlands first, along with reparations for the land burned. Tywin insisted that those farms had harbored outlaws or Tully partisans. Robert dismissed such claims as nonsense. The negotiations stretched on through the day. By nightfall, they had hammered out a precarious arrangement. Jaime would be free to house arrest under strict conditions within the Red Keep, no armor, no weapon, but no longer confined to a cell. Tywin would stand down his forces entirely, pulling back to the Westerlands. Only once that was complete would Jaime be permitted to ride west with a small retinue. In return, House Tully was to issue a formal apology for the kidnapping of Tyrion. The Crown would mediate a settlement of gold to certain offended Lannister bannermen. It was an uneasy compromise, leaving no side fully satisfied. But it was better than open warfare. Ned struggled with the decision to let Jaime out of his cell. Memories of the men Jaime had killed weighed heavily. Yet Robert insisted that it was the only way to keep Tywin from new invasions. "I will not see the realm torn apart again," the king said, and there was a haunted look in his eyes. Ned could not refute him. So, under the watchful eye of his father, Jaime Lannister was at last escorted from the dungeon. He looked thinner, paler, and his golden hair hung limp. But the arrogance in his stance remained, if muted by caution. His gaze met Ned's for a moment, an unreadable flicker passing in those green eyes. Then he turned away, greeting Tywin with a tight smile. "You see what they've done to me?" Jaime said in a low murmur. "But I still have my head, father." Tywin nodded. "Be grateful. and abide by the king's rules while we are here." Jaime snorted softly. "The king, right?" And so it was that the Kingslayer walked free in King's Landing, but not free to roam as he pleased. He was assigned quarters in Maegor's Holdfast, guarded at all hours by crown men, some loyal to Ned, some to Robert. Tywin, having secured at least that measure, prepared to depart again, leading his men back west. A hush of uneasy relief fell over King's Landing. War had been delayed, if not entirely averted. Ned found himself summoned by Robert soon after Jaime's release. The king was in his solar, finishing a goblet of wine. A sheen of sweat clung to his brow. He had clearly been quarreling with Cersei earlier. Her absence spoke volumes. "Ned," Robert said, voice heavy. "Let's walk." They left the solar and meandered through the Red Keep's corridors, the hush of late evening around them. Robert's massive frame was taut with tension. Finally, he spoke, voice softer than usual. "I hate all this. I want no more of it. I was a good warrior once, a man who loved the clash of swords. But this is all poison. Politics. Bargains. Threats." Ned understood. "Yet you wear the crown, Robert. It's the duty that comes with it." They reached a balcony overlooking the city. Torches twinkled below like scattered fireflies. Robert leaned on the stone balustrade, letting the wind cool his face. "I never wanted the damn thing. I wanted to kill Rhaegar to avenge Lyanna. After that, all I wanted was to drink and whore and forget." He paused. "Do you think we've done enough to keep the realm at peace?" Ned took a moment before answering. "We've taken a step back from open war. Tywin Lannister is no fool. He'll test us again if he sees weakness. We must remain vigilant." Robert nodded, a short, grim motion. "I can't lose you, Ned," he said, surprising Ned with the emotion in his tone. "Jon Arryn is gone. He was like a father to me. You're the only true friend I have left. And the only man in all 7 kingdoms I trust to keep me from drowning in my own damn folly." Moved by Robert's uncharacteristic vulnerability, Ned placed a hand on his shoulder. "I serve you, Robert, and I will do whatever I must to see the realm safe." A bitter half-smile twisted the king's mouth. "I know you will. I just pray this peace holds." They stood in silence for a time, the wind rustling their cloaks. Far below, the city sprawled, ignorant of the balancing act being performed in its name. Ned's thoughts drifted to Winterfell, the crisp northern air, the sense of honor that was simpler when far from the intrigue of the south. But here he was, embroiled in the game, and he could not abandon his duty now. In the weeks that followed, the tenuous calm endured. Tywin led the bulk of his army back to Casterly Rock, leaving only a small force in the Riverlands as a security measure. The Tullus fumed but did not dare openly confront them so long as the crown demanded peace. Jaime chafed under his restricted freedoms in King's Landing, pacing the halls of Maegor's Holdfast like a lion in a cage, but he obeyed the king's edicts for fear of further imprisonment. Cersei pushed daily for Jaime's complete release, offering cunning arguments about the cost to the royal image of keeping a Kingsguard knight confined. Robert only scowled and drank. For his part, Ned turned his attention to the secrets left behind by Jon Arryn, particularly the question of King Robert's heirs and the suspicious rumors about their parentage. He discovered, piece by piece, the proof of Cersei's incest with Jaime, the truth that Joffrey, Myrcella, and Tommen were not Robert's children at all. The knowledge weighed on Ned like a lead cloak. War could ignite again if the secret were exposed, overshadowing even the tensions with Tywin. He struggled with whether to tell Robert. Each day he saw the king's roving eye, his lustful indiscretions, his lack of love for his queen. Yet Robert prized the legacy of House Baratheon above all else. The blow of discovering his heirs were not his own might provoke unthinkable consequences. But how could Ned remain silent, a party to this monstrous deception? He tried to confront Cersei quietly, urging her to leave King's Landing with her children so that Robert need never learn the truth in a violent fashion. She spurned him, mocking his sense of honor and warning that the Lannisters would not bow to threats. Jaime, though restricted to the keep, likely learned of Ned's inquiries and confronted him in a quiet corridor one morning. The Kingslayer's face was clouded with danger. "You pry into matters you do not understand," Jaime said softly, stepping into Ned's path, arms folded. A pair of guards lingered behind him, watchful but uncertain whether to intervene. Ned met his gaze calmly. "I understand enough." Jaime's lip curled. "I hear you question the parentage of the royal children. A risky pursuit. My father has gone to great lengths for House Lannister's future." Ned stood unflinching. "Has he? Or have you, Sir Jaime?" Silence stretched. Jaime's hand twitched as if longing for a sword, but the king's orders forbade him from bearing arms. Still, menace radiated from him. I'll say this, Stark, if you truly care for the realm, you'll bury your suspicions. Some truths bring only ruin. And what of the ruin that comes from a lie? Ned countered, voice low. Jaime stepped closer. That's a very Stark way of seeing the world. But know this, you speak of my sister, my blood, and the children that share it. I will not see them destroyed by your stiff-necked honor. Ned did not waver. If they are truly Roberts, they have nothing to fear from the truth. Jaime's eyes flashed. Oh, they have everything to fear from Robert Baratheon's truth. Then he turned and stalked away, leaving Ned with the weight of that threat. For a fleeting moment, Ned actually pitied the Kingslayer. His entire life was a lie forced into the shadows. And while Ned abhorred the idea of siblings lying together, he could see some twisted corner of Jaime's soul that thought it was love. It did not excuse the murder of the king he once swore to protect, but perhaps it explained some of the deep cynicism that clung to Jaime's every word. Ned wrestled with his conscience day and night. Finally, he resolved to bring the matter before Robert. The king needed to know and then let the consequences fall where they might. But as fate would have it, Robert went on a hunting trip with his brother Renly and a handful of lords eager to curry favor, leaving Ned in charge as regent in his absence. The city stirred with rumors that the king intended to escape the constant swirl of the Lannister-Stark tension for a respite of ale and boar spears. Ned suspected Robert also fled from the burdens of fatherhood and the potential fracturing of his illusions if Ned spoke too soon. While Robert was away, the queen tried to seize the initiative, pressing for Jaime's full restoration of rights. She cornered Ned in the council chambers, flanked by Baelish and Pycelle, with Varys looking on silently. Cersei wore a gown of emerald silk, her golden hair artfully arranged, but her eyes were as hard as chipped jade. Lord Stark, she said, voice echoing in the high-ceilinged room, you rule in the king's stead, do you not? I demand you release Ser Jaime to resume his duties as the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. Ned regarded her calmly. Ser Barristan Selmy is Lord Commander of the King's Guard. Jaime is sworn brother, nothing more. And my instructions from the king are clear. Ser Jaime is to remain confined to Maegor's Holdfast until Tywin's forces stand down completely in the Riverlands. They have stood down. Cersei's voice was as smooth as a cat's purr, but with steel beneath. Reports say my father's forces now hold only our lands in the Westerlands. No more. Perhaps a few border garrisons remain as a standard measure, but hardly aggression. Ned folded his arms. Hoster Tully yet complains of armed Lannister patrols around the borders. Until we receive confirmation from the king, my orders remain the same. She moved closer, lowering her voice. You presume to hold so much power, Stark. If you cross me on this, I promise you will regret it. Her green eyes bored into his. Ned did not flinch. Is that a threat, Your Grace? She smiled thinly. A warning. I speak for the king's children. I speak for House Lannister. You do not want another war. Ned took a slow breath, controlling the anger that rose in his chest. I am the king's hand, sworn to uphold the realm's laws and keep the king's peace. I will not be bullied. For a tense moment, they glared at each other. Then Cersei gave a shrug, a mocking gesture of indifference. So be it. She turned on her heel, sweeping out of the chambers in a swirl of emerald silk, Baelish trailing behind with an amused smirk. Pycelle cleared his throat, muttered something about the realm's need for harmony, and shuffled away. Varys bowed courteously to Ned, a mysterious twinkle in his eye, then departed without a word. Ned was left alone, feeling the faint trembling of the aftermath of confrontation. The Queen's threats were not idle. If Tywin's troops truly had withdrawn, the impetus for holding Jaime might be gone. But Ned did not trust the Lannisters. Not after all he had seen. In the subsequent days, Robert's return from the hunt was delayed by inclement weather, flooded roads, they said. The city entered a strange limbo, with Ned ruling as regent while Cersei tested the bounds of her power, sending missives to Tywin, conferring secretly with Jaime, stirring the pot of court gossip. Ned found himself exhausted by the swirl of rumors and half-truths that soared through the Red Keep's corridors. And all the while, the knowledge of the children's true parentage weighed on him. If Robert died in some hunting accident, would Joffrey ascend the throne? That was a terrifying thought. Joffrey was a boy of questionable temperament and not even Robert's blood. Then came a day that changed everything once more. Ned awoke to the frantic pounding on his chamber door. A steward, pale-faced, announced that Robert had been grievously wounded in a boar hunt, gored through the thigh. He had been carried back to the city in agony. Ned rushed to the king's bedside. The scene was all too reminiscent of King Aerys' final days, except Robert was no mad king, only a drunken, wounded warrior. Cersei stood by, face taut, while Pycelle tried his potions and poultices. Robert's normally ruddy complexion was ashen, blood soaking the bandages around his leg. The stink of infection hung in the air. Ned knew that none of Pycelle's leechings or poultices could guarantee a recovery. It was a mortal wound. With a trembling hand, Robert beckoned Ned closer. "Ned," he rasped, sweat beading on his brow. "The realm, you must keep it together. Promise me." Ned took his hand, tears threatening his composure. "I promise, old friend." Robert's breath rattled. Write my will. Make it so that until Joffrey comes of age, you rule as regent. In my stead, keep them from tearing each other apart." His eyes flickered over to Cersei, who stared back. He did not see the truth, or if he did, it was drowned in delirium. "Joff, my son." "Guard him," Robert whispered, swallowing thickly. Ned felt his heart break under the weight of what Robert did not know. But he had no time to reveal the truth now, not when Robert lay dying. Instead, he bowed his head. "As you command, your grace." He penned the will but replaced the words "my son Joffrey" with "my heir," hoping it might buy time once Robert passed. The king was barely conscious, and he signed with a trembling scrawl, not noticing the subtle wording. Then Ned left him in Pycelle's care, pacing the corridors, feeling the realm teeter on the brink. With Robert gone, would Joffrey ascend? Would Stannis Baratheon press his own claim? And how would the Lannisters respond? Even as the sun set, painting King's Landing in ruddy hues, Robert's fever climbed, and by morning he was dead. Chaos broke out at court. Bells told the king's passing. Cersei wasted no time. She whisked Joffrey to the throne room, proclaiming him king. The boy, overwrought and pale, accepted the homage of kneeling lords who were compelled by the Lannister guards to do so. Ned attempted to present Robert's will, naming himself regent, but the paper was seized by the city watch under the new king's orders. Littlefinger maneuvered behind the scenes, telling Ned that the watch would still be loyal to him, that they need only wait for the right moment. Jaime Lannister emerged from Maegor's holdfast in white robes of the Kingsguard, overshadowing poor Ser Ba. Riston. He placed himself beside Joffrey, declaring his fealty as if Robert's death absolved all old grudges. He locked eyes with Ned across the throne room, a challenge that bristled with finality. The game was fully joined now. And so the moment arrived. Ned confronted the Lannisters, demanded that Joffrey step down until the matter of succession could be settled by the rightful heir Stannis. He read out the document that Robert had signed, or as much as he could recall, since the original had vanished. Cersei cried treason. The gold cloaks, which Ned believed loyal, turned their cloaks, siding with the Lannisters. Swords were drawn, throats were cut, and the Red Keep's halls erupted in violence. But in this version of events, this fleeting glimpse of a world changed by a single victory in the streets, Ned Stark had men ready, men who had sworn personal loyalty to him after seeing him stand firm against Jaime's attack. Ser Barristan Selmy, still an honorable knight, refused to stand aside for Jaime. A corps of gold cloaks held to the letter of the law. And Ned, battered but determined, advanced with these men, proclaiming the rightful regency in Robert's name. Chaos ensued, but in that chaos, Ned's forces seized the advantage. They captured Joffrey, despite Cersei's shrieking protest. Jaime, still not fully armed or trusting the king's presence, found himself outmaneuvered. The last Ned saw was the Kingslayer's face twisting in an agony of recognition, that his father's cautious plan had failed. In the end, the throne room lay spattered with blood. Many good men had died in those fateful minutes. But Ned Stark stood, sword in hand, the usurped boy king cowering at his feet, while Barristan Selmy knelt to him, pledging loyalty to the realm. Littlefinger had vanished, escaping into the corridors to spin new webs. Varys emerged, ghost-like, to bow and say, "My Lord Regent, the city is yours." And so with a single difference, Ned Stark's victory over Jaime Lannister on that fateful night in King's Landing, a new path opened. One where Ned held the upper hand in the capital, where the illusions of Cersei's children might crumble and the realm might yet avoid the devastation of the War of the Five Kings. Yet the cost was already terrible, and the enemies of House Stark would not rest. Tywin Lannister waited in the west, sure to march again. Stannis Baratheon would soon stake his claim. Renly might do the same. And beyond the narrow sea, dragons still stirred in the shadows of prophecy. But for that one shining moment, Eddard Stark stood, battered but unbroken, a man who had held true to his honor and lived. The taste of victory was bittersweet on his tongue, for he knew well that every triumph in the Game of Thrones carried a price, one that the realm would pay in blood or gold, in truth or in treachery. Yet if the gods were kind, perhaps this time the North's honor and the crown's duty would align, and the Seven Kingdoms might, for once, be guided by justice rather than consumed by cruelty. In that hope, Ned Stark sheathed his sword, feeling the sting in his bruised ribs. He gazed upon the Iron Throne with solemn eyes, knowing that no seat could ever be worth the lives lost. But the shape of the future lay before him now, in need of a steady hand and a conscience that would not bend. And as the new day's sun rose over King's Landing, he let out a quiet breath and thought of Winterfell, of his children, of all he had sworn to protect. And perhaps, just perhaps, the promise of a better tomorrow glimmered on the horizon. Eddard Stark stood at the center of the throne room, the taste of blood and sweat still lingering in the back of his throat. His sword, ice, rested sheathed at his hip, a final silent witness to the carnage of mere moments before. Corpses and wounded men lay scattered where the twin tides of Stark loyal guards and Lannister men-at-arms had clashed, accompanied by the desperate shifts of allegiance among the gold cloaks and the frightened hush of a few remaining onlookers. Torchlight flickered across the columns and the intricately tiled floor, giving the entire scene the look of some terrible fresco hammered into life. Outside, the bells tolled for King Robert, whose death had opened a viper's nest. Inside, standing in the space between the Iron Throne and the dais, Eddard Stark allowed himself only a short breath of air as the hush of aftermath settled over the grand hall. The wide, staring eyes of Joffrey Baratheon, who was no Baratheon at all, reflected equal parts shock and terror. He clutched his arm where a glancing blow had left a streak of crimson across the gold threads of his princely tunic. Ned could feel Barristan Selmy's presence just behind him, the old knight's breathing somewhat ragged. Every inch of Ser Barristan radiated a curious mix of sorrow and resignation, as if he had known from the first that Robert's death would lead to a dreadful confrontation. Yet to see it unfold so violently in the throne room he had vowed to protect weighed on him in ways only a king's guard could understand. Jaime Lannister knelt on the floor a short distance away, disarmed, with a handful of Stark men pointing their spears at his back. Cersei Lannister stood among a knot of stunned courtiers, her emerald gown stained with spattered drops of someone's blood. She gazed at Ned with pure hate, lips parted as if to loose a scream or a curse. Her father, Tywin, was not present to see this. But Ned knew word would reach him soon enough. Tywin had come to King's Landing, then left again in half measures, circling like a patient predator beyond the walls. War might have flared into full conflagration had Ned not forced these events to a head. Yet the realm now tottered at the edge of something that might be far worse than any single battle. Ned recalled the hush that had fallen as he demanded that Joffrey step down, citing Robert's final will. He had declared that until the rightful heir was established, Ned himself served as Lord Regent. Before, in a calmer court, such a claim might have been met with quiet discussion. But in the swirling chaos, with the gold cloaks dividing in loyalty, with Cersei screeching accusations of treason, swords were drawn. The clash had been brief but savage. A portion of the Watch, bribed by Littlefinger or threatened by Lannister gold, had turned on Ned's men. Only the presence of certain loyal officers and perhaps the moral authority Ned commanded swayed the tide. At last, a hush deeper than death fell. Joffrey, wounded and trembling, was a prisoner contained within a ring of steel. Cersei was cornered as well, though she had not relinquished her fierce posture. Jaime knelt helpless, hands bound behind his back by a length of chain meant for traitors. And there was Ned Stark, as far from Winterfell as the mind could stretch, left to manage the jagged consequences of a single terrible truth. He exhaled slowly, turning to Barristan Selmy, who bowed his silver head. Ser Barristan, Ned said in a grave voice. Your loyalty this day honors you. Will you command the King's Guard until we have sorted out the matter of succession? Barristan's eyes flicked toward the battered shape of Jaime. Lord Stark, he said, voice hushed, I have ever served the crown. To see the King's court soaked in blood, he took a moment. But yes, if it is the will of King Robert's region, I shall uphold my oath, for I know you act for the good of the realm. Ned nodded. Then he raised his voice so that the few watchers left in the hall could hear. Secure the survivors, he ordered. Remove the dead. Let Maester Pycelle or his aides tend the wounded, be they Lannister or otherwise. Ser Barristan, place men you trust around every entrance. Cersei spat, "This is treason in the highest order, Stark. The city will rise against you. My father will, eh?" Ned faced her without flinching. "I act under Robert's final command. He named me regent and protector of the realm until the rightful heir can be established. If you have any true loyalty to the Iron Throne, you would do well to comply." She bared her teeth in a fierce sneer. "You think the piece of paper will matter when my father's banners arrive? When they hear you hold my children captive?" It took all of Ned's composure to maintain an even tone. "You speak of the realm as if it is your house's property, my lady. But I will not harm your children. Nor will I let the Iron Throne be ruled by a lie." Her eyes narrowed. "What lie? Speak plainly, Stark." Ned felt the hush deepen. The watchers, those who had ears, listened carefully. Even Jaime, kneeling with his hair disheveled, lifted his head as though bracing for a blow. "The truth you know all too well," Ned said. "That Joffrey Baratheon is no son of Robert Baratheon. He is the product of incest between you and your brother." A collective gasp erupted. Some had heard rumors, perhaps others might have suspected. But no one had dared speak it so plainly in the throne room. For an instant, Ned wondered if Cersei might launch herself at him, nails poised like daggers. Instead, she drew a trembling breath. "Lies," she snarled, though her eyes, glistening, betrayed a measure of desperation. "You condemn me with vile rumors. You have no proof." Ned felt an echo of sorrow. For all her treachery, Cersei was still a woman cornered. Yet the realm deserved the truth. "I have proof enough," he said softly. "And even if I did not, Robert's children would bear his dark hair, as did all Baratheons before him. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommenna. All of them are gold, like the Lannisters. A simple puzzle once one looks closely." Cersei's mouth twisted. She said nothing more, but Ned could all but taste her fury. Joffrey was sobbing now, quite undone by shock and pain. "My mother told me I was the king's son. I am the king." His voice cracked with fear, with denial. Ned felt no triumph in seeing a boy brought so low. Though Joffrey was cruel, more a lion cub than a child, this was a cruelty of truth that spared no illusions. "Ser Barristan," Ned said, suppressing pity, "have Joffrey taken to suitable quarters under guard." He looked to the Lannister-friendly knights who had thrown down their arms and pleaded for mercy. "You men, as well as the queen, will be confined until I can arrange a great council to settle the matter of succession. See that they are treated fairly but kept separate. I will not have them conspiring." It took time to carry out these orders. Jaime, glaring balefully, was marched away in chains by a half-dozen loyal Stark men, along with several gold cloaks who had followed Ned's lead. A handful of the city watch who had sided with the Lannisters lay dead or gravely injured, their blood streaking the floor. The survivors were disarmed and placed under watch themselves. The entire throne room bore the scars of a hasty, savage fight. Ned felt the weight of it all pressing on him. They had seized the city, but at what cost? And how many more men would die when Tywin received word that his daughter and grandchildren were prisoners of House Stark? Eventually, only Ned, Ser Barristan, a few remaining guards, and Varys the Spider lingered amid the carnage, along with the scribes who had arrived late to record the newest developments. Littlefinger was nowhere to be found. Ned suspected him gone to ground, perhaps fleeing the castle. The man was cunning enough to slip away and reappear when it best suited him. Varys approached with his careful, measured steps. His robes of muted lavender swirled around him like a cloud. He pressed his fingers together. "My Lord Hand, my Lord Regent, perhaps I should say. An eventful day indeed. I trust you realize the steps you have taken will send shockwaves through every corner of the realm." "I realize it," Ned replied, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He could feel the ache of fatigue throbbing in his ribs, recalling his old wound from the street battle with Jaime. So much had happened since that night. It felt like years rather than weeks. Yet the truth could not remain hidden forever. Robert deserved better than to have his throne stolen by his sworn enemies, even if they wore his crown. Varys lowered his voice. "King Robert is gone, and you hold the queen and her children captive. Lord Tywin will not stand idle, that much is certain. The matter of who truly inherits the Iron Throne is a question that might tear the Seven Kingdoms apart." Ned blew out a slow breath. "Stannis Baratheon is Robert's eldest true brother. The throne passes to him by all the laws of the realm. Another brother, Renly, might make a claim, but Stannis is the elder. That is where matters stand." "And you trust that Stannis will not simply seize the city with an army?" Varys asked softly. He is a harsh man, Lord Stark, known for his rigid sense of justice. Some say he has no talent for mercy. What do you think he will do if, upon arriving, he finds Lannisters imprisoned and a city in uproar? Ned felt a stirring of unease. Justice is precisely what we need. If Stannis can provide that, so be it. War may come either way, but I will not let the realm suffer under a false king, nor a regency that pretends Joffrey is Robert's son. Varys nodded slowly as though measuring Ned's answer. Very well, my lord. Should you require my little birds to send any messages? I will let you know, Ned said curtly. He was not yet certain how deeply he could trust Varys, though the man's talents for gathering secrets had proven valuable in the past. For now, see that the city is calmed. We have enough blood on the streets. Varys bowed, withdrew, leaving Ned alone with his somber thoughts and the hushed presence of Ser Barristan. The White Knight stepped forward, gingerly lifting off his helm. His white hair clung to his brow with sweat. Lord Stark, he said quietly, we must proceed carefully. The common folk are already uneasy with the news that King Robert is dead. Now they shall hear that Joffrey is disinherited. A hesitation lingered in his voice. I have served kings, both mad and noble. I have stood by when entire houses were cut down. Forgive me, but I must say, if you handle this poorly, the realm might see the greatest strife since the days of the Targaryens. Ned nodded. That is why we must handle it rightly. I'll send word to Stannis. He is Robert's lawful heir. When he arrives, we will convene a council of lords to confirm it. I will not name myself king, nor try to hold the throne by might. That is not my place. Barristan's shoulders seemed to ease a fraction. Honorable as always, my lord. Then let us do what we can to maintain order until Stannis arrives. With that, Ned turned and strode from the throne room, his boots leaving footprints in the congealing blood. He prayed silently to the old gods for guidance. Robert's passing weighed on him like a funeral stone, but he could not pause to grieve. The realm needed direction, and swiftly, or else Tywin Lannister's wrath would come like a hammer blow. In the ensuing days, Ned took control of the City Watch in earnest. With Ser Barristan's help, he dismissed or jailed any officers suspected of taking Lannister gold. Some had fled, while others huddled in the barracks, uncertain which side to choose. Slowly, an uneasy calm settled over King's Landing. Rumors ran wild. That Ned Stark had murdered the king and seized the throne, that Cersei had admitted her incest, that dragons were flying in from the east to claim the city. Every rumor was wilder than the last. The small folk murmured, the butchers and bakers and whores anxious about what the next sunrise would bring. Meanwhile, Cersei and her children were confined to their chambers in Maegor's Holdfast. Ned assigned half a dozen loyal men, along with 2 older knights and a few of Ser Barristan's best, to guard them. He did not permit them the freedom to roam the Red Keep. Myrcella and Tommen were frightened far more than Joffrey. Tommen was barely more than a child. Myrcella had wept for her father's death or the man she believed her father. Ned found no joy in caging them, but it was necessary. If they escaped, the Lannisters could rally behind them at once. Jaime Lannister was placed in a different part of the Holdfast, guarded just as closely, his accommodations fit for a night but no better. When Ned visited him, he found the Kingslayer pacing like a caged lion, fists clenched. You've made a grand mess of it, Stark, Jaime said the moment Ned stepped inside, the door guarded by 2 of Ned's men. All for your precious honor. Did you not consider how many thousands will die for this secret? Ned eyed him calmly. The secret of what you've done with your sister is what would condemn thousands, not the truth itself. You Lannisters spin your webs, sowing lies everywhere. Now the realm must know. Jaime snorted. Brave words from a man too stubborn to see beyond his own nose. You'd condemn my sister, our children, to shame and possibly death. Or war. Stannis Baratheon has no mercy in him, especially for traitors to the bloodline. Do you think he'll let them live, once he arrives? Ned pressed his lips together. He had thought on that question more than once, especially at night when the flickering candlelight reminded him of how precarious the city's peace truly was. If it were up to me, your sister and her children would be exiled, perhaps. Sent away to live quietly, far from the throne. But I cannot speak for Stannis. The law is his to uphold. Let us hope he chooses mercy over slaughter. Jaime's mouth twisted. Hope? That's all you have now? You've pinned the realm's future on the sense of justice of a man known for punishing even the smallest slight. Perhaps this is who you are, a man so enthralled by honor that you'll let the realm burn if only to preserve your precious morality. It stung, but Ned kept his composure. I see no better course. And I will not do murder to preserve your secret. Wouldn't you? Jaime's tone turned mocking. I recall your promise to kill me in the streets that night if I did not yield. This is merely another form of murder, more grand and indirect, with thousands of lives at stake. But do as you wish, Stark. The game is already in motion. Ned turned away, the weight of doubt pressing on him. No one forced you to lie with your sister, he said, voice tight. No one forced your father to raise armies. You speak of consequences as though they're my doing. You lit these fires yourselves, Kinclair. Jaime gave no reply. Ned rapped on the door and the guards let him out, leading him through the corridors where tapestries fluttered in a stray draft. He pressed the memories of Jaime's scorn aside. There was too much else to handle. Each day, more ravens flew out from the Red Keep, bearing Ned's message to the great lords of Westeros. Robert Baratheon had died. Eddard Stark served as regent until a great council could be convened to address the crown's succession. He invited the lords to gather in King's Landing to witness and confirm the truth. Notably, Ned sent a personal raven to Stannis on Dragonstone, urging him to come and claim the throne by right of blood. Another he sent to Renly, hoping the younger Baratheon might see sense and not press his own claim. From the north, Ned expected Robb Stark to read the news and stand ready, though Ned prayed the boy would not march south on impulse. The realm teetered and all he could do was send words on wings. The city itself needed governance. Robert's feasts and tournaments had drained the royal coffers. Peter Baelish, who might have explained the labyrinth of debts, was missing. Varys appeared daily, offering hushed suggestions about how to maintain order, distributing bread in the poorest districts, ensuring the gold cloaks patrolled in pairs to deter riots, bribing certain key figures in the markets and docks to keep them from stirring trouble. Ned disliked the subtleties of such measures, but if they prevented a starving mob from overrunning the Red Keep, then so be it. Sansa and Arya lingered in a limbo of their own. Ned forbade them from leaving the castle grounds. The city was no place for them now, with tensions so high. Sansa, still recovering from the shock of losing her beloved fantasy of a royal betrothal, kept to her rooms or the godswood, often accompanied by Septa Mordane. She had not forgiven her father for tearing apart her dreams of being queen. At times, she looked at him with red-rimmed eyes, as if all the blame for her heartbreak belonged to him. Arya, by contrast, flitted about like a restless sparrow. She practiced swordplay under Syrio Farrell's watchful eye, but the training hall was far quieter now, with the threat of real violence at every corner. Arya asked endless questions about the unfolding events, questions to which Ned had few answers. He struggled to reassure her that they were safe, that Winterfell awaited them when all this was done. Yet they both knew safety was precarious. A week passed. News arrived daily of lords stirring from their seats, uncertain where to pledge their loyalty. Some, especially in the west, would surely side with Tywin Lannister no matter the allegations of incest. In the Vale, Ned's sister-in-law Lisa remained aloof, refusing to commit the strength of the Eyrie while also refusing to support the Lannisters. The Martells of Dorne were quiet. The Reach seemed divided. Mace Tyrell might wait to see which side looked strongest. The Iron Islands, as ever, murmured of independence. The Tullus at Riverrun were outraged by the news that House Lannister had nearly seized power through false heirs, but they did not wish to provoke Tywin prematurely. Riverrun had only just seen Lannister forces withdraw from their borders. In the midst of this uncertain lull, Ned made a choice. He dispatched riders north to gather more men from the loyal bannermen of Winterfell. While he could not bring the entire might of the North swiftly, he needed enough men in King's Landing to keep the peace should Tywin come. Many of the city's inhabitants, especially those of Apurur Station, actually welcomed Ned's presence, seeing in him a decent, no-nonsense hand at the helm. They had grown weary of Lannister arrogance. Nonetheless, the tension was palpable and the slightest spark might set it all ablaze. Another fortnight passed before the first envoy arrived from Dragonstone. It was not Stannis, but a sharp-faced knight named Ser Axel Florent, bearing a letter sealed with Stannis's flaming heart sigil. Ned received him in the small council chamber, flanked by Ser Barristan and a handful of lesser lords who had begun filtering into the city. Ser Axel bowed stiffly. "Lord Hand, Lord Regent, as I understand it, I bring you word from Lord Stannis Baratheon, rightful heir to the Iron Throne." His voice carried a pointed edge, as though to challenge any who might deny Stannis's claim. Ned inclined his head. "We welcome Lord Stannis's words. What says he?" Ser Axel's gaze flicked around the room. Varys was there, silent in a corner, as was a Tyrell cousin who had arrived with some retinue from Highgarden to observe events. Arya had slipped in quietly as well, though she tried to remain inconspicuous behind a pillar. Ned allowed her to watch, believing it might be educational in some small measure, provided she did not interrupt. Lord Stannis acknowledges that you have revealed the treachery of the Lannisters, Ser Axel began, and he commends your adherence to the law. He also notes that you hold King's Landing in your power with the false heirs in custody. For that he thanks you. However, Lord Stannis is mindful that the city remains a tinderbox. He does not wish to see it sacked or its people harmed. He is gathering a fleet and a host on Dragonstone, but he must ensure the loyalty of the Stormlands before marching on King's Landing. He requests that you maintain order until he can arrive to claim the throne. Ned listened carefully, digesting each word. Does he give any indication when he might arrive? Soon, Ser Axel said, though his tone implied it might be later than Ned would prefer. Lord Stannis would also have you know that he expects the immediate arrest of all known conspirators of incest and treason. He regards Jaime Lannister as guilty of regicide. He slew King Aerys and has now attempted to place his bastard offspring upon the throne. Ser Barristan stirred at that mention, remembering the day Jaime had slain the Mad King. Ned too recalled how Robert had pardoned Jaime for the killing, seeing it as a blow against the Targaryens. Yet to Stannis's unyielding mind, the old sin was never washed away. Ned sighed inwardly. Jaime Lannister is already in custody, he said, confined to Maegor's Holdfast. As for the rest of his house, Cersei and her children are likewise confined. No harm will befall them unless they force our hand. Ser Axel nodded, though a small hint of disapproval lingered, as if Stannis would have preferred swifter punishment. Very well. Lord Stannis appreciates your diligence. He also requests you continue sending ravens to all the great houses, urging them to declare for him. He is the only legitimate heir. The realm must unite under one banner or suffer the chaos of multiple claimants. Ned's jaw tightened. He was well aware that Renly might soon proclaim himself king as well. I shall do so, he said. But it is uncertain how the lords will respond. We can only hope they see reason. Ser Axel pursed his lips. Reason? Lord Stannis has reason on his side, but the lords of Westeros are fickle. Many might prefer a pliable boy or a charming puppet. Stannis is neither. Be prepared, Lord Stark, some will choose the weaker claim if it profits them. Ned allowed a hint of grim acknowledgement. We will deal with that when the time comes. For now, the city stands. I will maintain order. You may inform Lord Stannis that King's Landing awaits his arrival, and I will do everything in my power to ensure he takes the throne without bloodshed. The formalities continued for a while. Ser Axel asked to inspect Joffrey and the other Lannisters in captivity, but Ned refused to let an envoy with uncertain standing near them. He offered that Pycelle or another maester could bear witness that they still lived. It was a measured courtesy. Ser Axel accepted reluctantly, then he departed to find suitable lodging. Word spread quickly that Stannis was preparing to come, though no one knew precisely when. Meanwhile, more lords trickled into the city. Some came out of morbid curiosity, others to gauge the political winds. Lord Hoster Tully, too ill to travel, sent his son Edmure in his place. Edmure arrived with an entourage of Tully and Mallister knights, greeting Ned with warmth, albeit overshadowed by the knowledge of how close the Riverlands had come to open war with the Lannisters. Ned spoke with him privately, assuring him that the immediate danger in the Riverlands had lessened since Tywin's partial withdrawal, but Edmure was not comforted. The lion never retracts its claws for long, he muttered. My father wanted me to ask whether House Stark and House Tully should ally more strongly. Ned understood the unspoken suggestion. Edmure might have been fishing for a betrothal or some other binding arrangement, but Ned had daughters who were still reeling from the fiasco with Joffrey. He had no appetite to promise Sansa or Arya away for political gain. We are already allies, by marriage, Ned told him gently. Let us first secure the throne and ensure the realm does not plunge into chaos. Then we can speak of deeper bonds. Edmure's disappointment was palpable but polite. He insisted that House Tully remained loyal to Ned's regency, if only to keep the Lannisters in check. Ned thanked him. In these uncertain days, even reluctant support was precious. The next wave of arrivals included envoys from the Vale, the Stormlands, and from the Westerlands themselves, though Tywin did not come in person. The Westerlands envoy bore only a short letter, which Ned read in the presence of Edmure, Barristan, and Varys. Lord Eddard Stark, Warden of the North, so-called Regent of the realm, you hold my daughter and my son captive. You have declared my grandchildren to be bastards, and you have usurped the rightful seat of power in King's Landing. These actions are a direct affront to House Lannister. Though King Robert once pardoned your indiscretions, do not think my memory so short. If you do not release my family and renounce your slander upon our house, we will consider this a state of war. We have not marched yet, for we still hope to resolve matters peaceably. But the moment you harm my children or grandchildren, the full might of the West shall fall upon you. I will speak with Stannis Baratheon, if he deigns to approach me, but I will never abandon my blood to your so-called justice. Tywin Lannister, Lord of Casterly Rock and Warden of the West. Ned set the letter aside with a weary sigh. He accuses me of usurpation, when it was he and his house who tried to place a false heir on the throne. Edmure Tully spat, "That man is a serpent in lion's skin. You cannot trust a single syllable he writes." Varys let out a quiet, theatrical sigh. Yet he has the largest army in the 7 kingdoms, or very nearly. And if the gold mines of the Westerlands are as full as they say, he can hire sells words from all across the narrow sea. He is indeed a formidable foe. Ned glanced at the letter again. He threatens war, but also dangles the possibility of negotiation if Stannis comes. Perhaps he hopes to bargain with Stannis, offering to acknowledge his claim in exchange for leniency toward Jaime and Cersei. Ser Barristan set his jaw. Leniency for incest and treason? Stannis is not known for leniency. A gloomy hush fell. Ned could almost see the labyrinth of potential wars forming in front of him like lines on a map. Stannis might come with the power of Dragonstone and the Stormlands. Renly might declare himself from the Reach. Tywin might ally with Renly or remain alone, or he might attempt to subjugate the Riverlands again. Meanwhile, the North was too distant and too slow to fully unify behind Ned in the short term, though he had called for more men. The Vale remained under Lysa's uncertain leadership. And what of the Ironborn, always seeking advantage in southern storms? The entire realm was fracturing with every rumor. Yet day by day Ned did what he could to hold King's Landing together. He dismissed the corrupt officials in the treasury, replaced them with sober men who lacked the cunning of Baelish but at least possessed honesty. He had the city watch patrol the streets with explicit orders to quell looting and violence. Bread prices were regulated to prevent the worst of starvation. He also issued decrees limiting the movement of gold from the city's vaults so that the Lannisters could not bribe half the city's tradesmen again. Some money lenders in the city hissed and balked at that, but Ned refused to budge. Let them curse him. It was better than letting Tywin by an uprising. When he had a moment of respite, usually in the Godswood, Ned tried to piece together the scattered remnants of his personal life. Sansa hovered at the edge of grief and confusion. Arya turned her energy into training. The memory of Robert haunted him. Robert's laughter, Robert's boisterous presence. His heavy hand on Ned's shoulder. Gone now, in a swirl of wine and a boar's tusk. He also thought often of Jon Arryn, who had died unraveling this very mystery. Ned felt a stirring of guilt that he had not come to King's Landing sooner, that perhaps he could have saved Jon. Yet regrets were useless. The only path now was forward. News eventually reached them that Renly Baratheon had disappeared from the capital in the immediate days after Robert's death. Slipped out quietly, no doubt with the cunning of Littlefinger in tow. Now rumors placed him in Highgarden, forging an alliance with House Tyrell. Word had leaked that Renly meant to press a claim of his own, citing that he would make a more amiable king than his humorless older brother. Ned felt that chill again, war might truly blossom on multiple fronts. As the 3rd week ended since Robert's death, the city of King's Landing lay in a strange hush, neither at peace nor at war, a place of bristling guards and uneasy alliances. Then at last, distant horn calls announced a fleet on the Blackwater Bay. It was Stannis Baratheon come to claim his crown. Ned mustered his forces, such as they were, along the city walls. The gold cloaks in new livery with the dire wolf of House Stark discreetly sewn beside the crown stag of the late king stood in ranks at the gates. Ned did not bar Stannis from entering, but he wanted to ensure the approach was orderly to prevent misunderstanding. With him stood Ser Barristan, Edmure Tully, and a half-dozen other lords who had gathered. Arya remained in the castle with Sansa under guard for their own safety. Cersei and Jaime had no choice but to watch from behind their locked windows, seeing the new arrivals in the bay. Stannis disembarked at the docks in full armor, dark, unadorned plate, a heavy cloak embroidered with the flaming heart of his personal sigil. His face was set in a stern frown beneath his close-cropped beard. Around him gathered his knights, Lord Valerion, Ser Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, if the rumors were correct, and various other barons of the Stormlands. Dozens of warships filled the harbor, the sails snapping in the wind. The sight was both impressive and ominous. Ned met them at the gates, bowing in courtesy. "Lord Stannis, on behalf of the realm, I welcome you to King's Landing." Stannis acknowledged him with a curt nod, scanning Ned's face for any hint of duplicity. "Lord Stark, we have corresponded. You know why I am here?" Ned said simply. "I have held the city in the name of the rightful heir, preventing further bloodshed. We can only hope we see no more." Stannis's gaze flicked over the battlements, noting the presence of archers. "You have prepared well for a siege, should it come to that. I trust you do not intend to bar me from my city." Ned shook his head. "I only intend to ensure that you come in peace, my lord. I would not see the city sacked. The people have seen too much blood already." Stannis's jaw tightened. "I come to claim what is mine by right. Any who stand against me, I will treat as traitors." Ned took a steadying breath. Stannis's unyielding nature was already apparent. "That may be your prerogative as king, but I counsel mercy. The Lannisters are in my custody. Let us see justice done, but not in haste." Many of the men who served the Lannisters had no choice. A muscle in Stannis's cheek twitched. "We will speak more of this inside the castle. Open the gates to my host. I will not march an entire army into the city if you assure me you have no trap planned." Ned signaled and the gates were opened. He had not the numbers to repel a full assault if Stannis turned out to be an enemy in truth, but so far, it seemed the older Baratheon brother had no interest in duplicity. As the columns of Stormland knights and foot soldiers filed in, tension rippled through King's Landing. The smallfolk peered from windows and doorways, uncertain whether to cheer or cower. Many remembered Robert Baratheon's triumphal entry years ago when he took the city from the Targaryens. Now his brother walked the same streets, bearing the same black hair, though sprinkled with gray, and the same resolute step. Ned escorted Stannis and his principal lords up to the Red Keep, flanked by rows of gold cloaks. Each step felt like treading on cracked ice. One misstep, one spark of suspicion, and the entire city might ignite. But eventually they reached the Great Hall where the Iron Throne loomed. Stannis's gaze flickered to it, perhaps imagining himself seated upon those twisted swords. Ned stood aside to let the man approach. "My lord Stannis, by Robert's own blood and by the laws of the realm, the throne is yours if the Great Council confirms your claim." Stannis turned, frowning. "A Great Council? Why do we need one? My brother is dead, leaving no true-born heirs. I am next in line. That is the law, and all the lords must bend the knee." Ser Barristan stepped forward. "My lord, we have called the lords of the realm to assemble. Some are already in the city, others on their way. If they see you proclaim yourself king without debate, it might provoke them to question your legitimacy. If you let them speak, let them see the proof of the Lannister deceit, you will secure a stable rule." Stannis's expression remained stony, but he exhaled. "Very well. If that is what is required to spare the realm from the chaos of multiple claimants, I will submit to this formality. But let it be swift. And let the lords know that those who would stand against me will face the king's justice." Edmure Tully bowed. "You shall find House Tully in support of your claim, Lord Stannis. We have long allied with House Stark, and we stand for truth in this matter. But caution is wise. Tywin Lannister may already be mustering to defend his family's honor, false though it may be." Stannis's lips thinned. "Then if Tywin Lannister makes war, he will pay the price. Lord Stark, you hold Jaime, Cersei, and their brood. Where are they?" Ned nodded. "Confined in Maegor's holdfast under guard. I assure you, they are treated well." "Bring Jaime to me," Stannis commanded abruptly. "I will speak with him." Ned hesitated. To hand Jaime over could spark violence if Jaime was suddenly executed. Yet he had no authority to deny Stannis, who by law had the best claim to kingship. "As you wish, my lord," Ned replied, "but I would advise caution. If you judge them too harshly before the eyes of the realm, it might spark Tywin's rebellion." Stannis's eyes glinted with cold determination. "Tywin may do as he pleases. I will do what must be done." So it was that Ned summoned guards to retrieve Jaime. The Kingslayer was brought forth, wrists manacled, hair disheveled, still sporting the bruises from his earlier captivity. He did not appear cowed, though his face was pale from confinement. The Great Hall had mostly emptied, leaving only Stannis's core retinue, Ned, Barristan, Edmure Tully, and a few more. The hush was complete as Jaime stood before Stannis. "Kingslayer," Stannis addressed him curtly. "How fitting that you, who once slew Aerys Targaryen, would then help place false heirs on the throne. Your father gambled the realm's peace for your sister's children. Jaime gave a short laugh, not entirely devoid of contempt. You assume I had any illusions about the game being played? I was a pawn or perhaps a willing piece. Call me what you will. I saved the city once by slaying a mad king. Now your pious sense of justice calls me traitor again. Fascinating. Stannis' mouth tightened. Do not presume you did the realm a favor by breaking your king guard vows. Treachery is treachery even if it spared blood that day. And now you stand accused of further crimes, incest, conspiring to place bastard children upon the throne. How do you answer? Jaime shifted his chain-bound wrists. Do you expect me to shout innocence? I have no illusions about your capacity for mercy, Lord Stannis. I'll not grovel. Do your worst. Stannis' gaze hardened. Air felt charged. Ned tensed, remembering the fearsome stories of Stannis' unyielding judgments. Jaime's fate might be sealed in an instant. Then Ser Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, stepped forward. He was a gaunt man with a weathered face, missing a few fingertips on one hand as punishment for smuggling in times past. My lord, Davos said respectfully, might I advise caution? Lord Stark has kept these prisoners as a means to prevent Lord Tywin from unleashing war. If we move too swiftly, Tywin may see no reason not to raise the banners. Jaime's mouth twitched in something like gratitude, though quickly masked by scorn. Stannis gave Davos a measured look. You speak wisely as ever, Davos. Very well. Jaime Lannister will remain imprisoned for now, pending the decision of the Great Council. But his guilt is plain. I see no outcome but death for him after he is found guilty of treason. Ned's heart clenched. He did not pity Jaime, but he could foresee the violent retribution Tywin would exact if his golden son lost his head. Lord Stannis, he said cautiously, the realm might be better served if Jaime were allowed to take the Black, or be exiled across the narrow sea. He could not believe he was advocating for Jaime's life, but he had seen too many men die already. A living son might keep Tywin on a shorter leash. Stannis' mouth twisted in distaste. I do not deal in half measures. We shall see. Thus ended the confrontation for the moment. Jaime was taken away under heavier guard, cursing under his breath. Over the next hours, Stannis took up a temporary seat in the royal apartments, Robert's old rooms ironically enough, while Ned continued to serve as hand, or regent, or both, though Stannis was beginning to assert direct authority. The question of how to proceed loomed like a storm cloud. Should they convene the council at once and name Stannis king before all lords arrived, or wait and risk giving Tywin time to muster a rebellion? Stannis demanded an audience with Cersei, which Ned cautiously arranged in a chamber lined with guards. The moment they saw each other, both burned with mutual hatred. Cersei wore a morning gown of black silk, her hair loose about her shoulders, though her posture was as proud as ever. The lines under her eyes revealed sleepless nights. Stannis faced her, arms folded behind his back. So you were the whore who tried to seize my brother's throne, Stannis said without preamble. You slept with your brother, bore his bastard children, and deceived all the realm. Cersei did not flinch. My children are of royal blood, she hissed. You may think you have one, Stannis, but blood calls for blood. My father will see to that. Stannis' face was carved from stone. Your father is nothing before the rightful king. If he marches, I will break him. And your children, if they were wise, would beg mercy for their false claim. Cersei glared at Ned as if blaming him for giving Stannis this audience. If you harm a hair on my children's heads, Stannis cut her off. I do not relish harming children, but the law is clear, they are not Roberts. They have no claim to the throne. When the time for judgment comes, we shall see if the realm demands your punishment. Cersei's eyes burned. You think I fear your justice? My father's men will come, and you will wish you had bartered for your life when you had the chance. Stannis' lips curved in a humorless smile. I do not barter with incestuous traitors. Lord Stark, remove her. This is pointless. And so the queen was dragged away, still spitting threats. Ned rubbed his temples, a headache growing. Each encounter only hardened Stannis' resolve for harsh action and Cersei's for stirring rebellion. Tywin's hammer blow might fall at any moment. Stannis then called a council of all the lords who had arrived. It was a fractious gathering, held in the same chambers where Robert's small council once met. Dozens of men crammed around, from storm lords like Lord Caron and Lord Estermont to river lords like Edmure Tully and Jason Mallister, plus a scattering of Crownland's lords who had come to see which way the wind blew. All looked to Stannis at the head of the table, with Ned seated at his right. Ser Barristan stood guard at the door, along with 4 more Kingsguard who had pledged loyalty to Stannis. The old White Knight was deeply torn. He had served the Targaryens, then Robert, and now Robert's brother. Duty bound him, though his honor was tested by the swift changes in regime. Stannis wasted no time. Lords of Westeros, you have come here to witness the rightful claiming of the Iron Throne by the late King Robert's eldest brother. I stand before you with Eddard Stark, who was Robert's hand and regent who uncovered the Lannister treachery. We must decide how to proceed with those who remain loyal to the incestuous line. Tywin Lannister has threatened war. Renly Baratheon may soon contest my claim. Will you stand with me? A low rumble of voices filled the chamber. Many had questions. Some were uneasy about naming Stannis king without seeing further proof. Others demanded a chance to speak. The greatest tension came when a handful of Westerland's men, present as nominal observers, rose to declare that the children of Cersei still had a claim, that the allegations of incest were mere rumor. Ned and Barristan both offered their testimonies, citing Jon Arryn's investigations, the black-haired Baratheon line, and the full catalogue of genealogies. Varys chimed in, slyly referencing certain hidden admissions from King Robert's final hours. Eventually, the outraged Westerland's men were told to stand down or face arrest. Some left in protest, presumably to send word to Tywin. The seeds of fresh conflict were sown with every word. Once the worst of the outcry had subsided, Stannis hammered his gauntlet hand on the table. Enough! By the power vested in me by birth and by Robert's own words before witnesses, I claim the throne. Those who doubt me are free to return to their castles. But know that if you raise a banner against me, it will be the banner of a traitor. Some lords, especially from the Stormlands, pounded their fists on the table in approval. The men from the Riverlands mostly nodded in acceptance. A few Crownlands lords joined them, but the mood remained grim. None could ignore the looming question of how House Lannister and House Tyrell, indeed possibly Renly too, would respond. It might be that Stannis's coronation ignited civil war. Nevertheless, the council ended with a declaration. Stannis Baratheon would be crowned in the September of Baelor within 3 days, and all lords present were invited to witness. When Ned emerged from the council, sweat trickled down his spine despite the castle's chill corridors. He found Arya waiting by a pillar as she often did when she wasn't training. She looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "They're naming Stannis the king, aren't they?" she asked. "So is all this done now?" Ned managed a weary smile, brushing a strand of her dark hair aside. "Not yet, my little one. The realm is not so simple. Even if Stannis is crowned, some might refuse to bend the knee. And war may follow." He sighed. "But we are one step closer to truth, at least." Arya nodded thoughtfully. "And truth matters." He smiled faintly. "Yes, Arya, truth matters." Then came the ceremony in the great September of Baelor, which had never seemed so fraught with tension. Scores of septons and silent sisters moved through the sweeping arches, lighting candles and chanting prayers. Dozens of lords attended, wearing their finest cloaks and tunics, though an undercurrent of fear ran through them. The gold cloaks lined the steps outside, ensuring no riotous mobs approached. Within the sept, Stannis wore a simple circlet of black iron upon his brow at first, a temporary symbol. As the High Septon concluded a recitation of Robert's lineage and the rightful laws of inheritance, he took from his side a crown hammered into a circlet of steel and rubies, an echo of House Baratheon's sigil. He placed it upon Stannis's head, pronouncing him King of the Undulls, the Rhoynar, and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, Protector of the Realm. The bells tolled across King's Landing, but the sound lacked the joyous ring of Robert's long-ago coronation. Outside, smallfolk gathered, uncertain whether to cheer or scowl. To them, this was a new king who might soon bring bloodshed. Inside, a handful of Storm Lords knelt quickly. The River Lords followed suit. The Crownlands Lords somewhat grudgingly. Ned Stark bent the knee with a measured sincerity, and so did Ser Barristan. For a moment, a hush deeper than the crypts of Winterfell enveloped the September King. Stannis Baratheon rose, the rubies glinting in the candlelight. Afterward, at the feast in the Red Keep's hall, the tension grew more palpable. No word from Renly. No word from Tywin. Yet the knowledge of their presence beyond the city walls pressed upon every guest. Stannis sat at the high table with Ned on one side, Edmure Tully on the other, and a scattering of Storm Lords around them. Food was plentiful, though lacking the extravagance of Robert's more carousing feasts. Stannis had already imposed stricter spending. Wine flowed, but not in the same liberal amounts. No boisterous songs rung out, only hushed conversation. Near the end of the evening, Stannis rose. "Lords of Westeros," he declared, I hold in my power the traitors who tried to steal my throne, Cersei Lannister, Jaime Lannister, and their bastard children. Let it be known that their fate will be decided by the king's justice. However, I will grant one chance for their house to avoid ruin. Let Tywin Lannister come to me, kneel, and offer penance for his family's crimes. Then perhaps I shall show mercy. A ripple of talk spread. Some found the offer surprising. Stannis was not known for mercy. Others saw it as a hollow gesture, sure to be spurned by the proud Tywin. Ned listened, heart heavy. He could imagine Tywin's response to hearing that he must kneel before Stannis in penance. The lion would bare its fangs. Still, any chance for a negotiated settlement was better than none. Days passed in the anxious quiet of a city expecting war. Stannis took up the reins of governance, ordering the city watch about with crisp efficiency, trimming any leftover corruption from the treasury. He quickly discovered the crown's mountain of debt, cursing Robert for his spendthrift ways. My brother was a fool with coin, he muttered one evening to Ned, scanning the ledgers. We owe the Iron Bank of Bravos a staggering sum. Plus the Lannisters. Another reason they may wish to seat themselves on the throne. Ned recalled how Littlefinger had boasted of juggling accounts to keep the realm afloat. With or without that debt, the Lannisters would have tried their scheme. It seems your brother's love for the queen blinded him to her manipulations. Stannis set the ledgers aside, eyes cold. Be that as it may, we shall repay what we owe. If I am to be a just king, I cannot default on the debts. But the war chest is nearly empty. If Tywin marches, we need coin for sellswords, supplies, siege weapons, he exhaled. Lord Stark, can the North lend funds or men soon? Ned shook his head slowly. We have men if they can be gathered in time, but not a treasury overflowing with gold. Winterfell is no gold mine. I can send word for them to muster, though the distance is great. Stannis looked away frustrated. So be it. The Stormlands alone will not provide enough men to repel a serious Lannister host if they bring the Reach into it. We need alliances. Ned thought of the Vale, the Tully alliance, the uncertain Martells, and Dorne. We must reach out. Hoster Tully is ill, but Edmure will rally the Riverlands if needed. Perhaps if we show the Tyrells that you mean to protect the realm, not bleed it dry, they might side with you. Stannis grimaced. The Tyrells crowned Renly in their hearts, or so the rumor says. But if they have not declared openly, there might be hope. The conversation ended on that uncertain note. Ned went to the Godwood for a moment of calm, kneeling by the weirwood tree, letting the hush of the evening envelop him. In the distance, the city's noises drifted, a dog barking, a drunken shout, carts rumbling over cobblestones. He prayed to the old gods for the strength to prevent a war that might drown the realm. But the old gods were silent, as they so often were. Soon enough, ravens arrived bearing ill news. One from the west said that Tywin Lannister had called his banners in earnest and marched to Harrenhal, a massive fortress in the Riverlands where he could rally further knights and hedge lords to his cause. Another raven from the south rumored that Renly Baratheon had indeed forged an alliance with Margaery Tyrell. He had crowned himself king in Highgarden in a small ceremony, claiming that Stannis was unfit to rule. Word was that the Tyrell bannermen were flocking to Renly in droves, for he promised a kinder, more prosperous reign than the grim Stannis. Ned brought the letters to Stannis, whose face darkened with each word. Traitors, both, Stannis snapped, meaning Tywin and Renly alike. They would shred the realm to pieces for their ambitions. Your Grace, Ned said quietly, Renly is your younger brother. Is there no chance of reconciliation? Reconciliation? Stannis gave a hollow laugh. I know Renly. He is charming, but he covets power. If the Tyrells back him, it means they are set on seeing him on the throne. They consider me too stern, too unlovable. But the throne is not about love, it is about law. He slammed his hand on the table. If I must go to war against my own blood, so be it. Ned felt a cold sorrow. Then we must prepare. The city cannot hold out if the armies of the West and the Reach converge. And if Renly and Tywin come to terms, we could see a host of 50,000 men. Stannis stood abruptly. We will not cower behind these walls as they gather. We will strike first. The Riverlords have joined us, the Stormlands stand with me, and the Crownlands remain in submission. With cunning, we could catch Tywin off guard at Harrenhal or keep him pinned while we deal with Renly. Ned rubbed his aching temples. We must be mindful not to leave King's Landing undefended. The Lannisters might see an opening to free their queen and Prince Joffrey. He could envision the chaos if that happened. We also have Cersei's children, Tommen and Myrcella. I will not let them be slaughtered as part of any war strategy. Stannis' gaze was as hard as iron. I do not make war on children. They will remain hostages to keep Tywin in check. But I have no illusions, if Tywin sees advantage, he will not hesitate just because we have his grandchildren. So the planning for war began. Stannis conferred with his most trusted commanders, men like Ser Davos, who had a head for practicalities. Ned and Edmure Tully joined, offering knowledge of the Riverlands. Step by step, they laid out a campaign that might keep Tywin pinned at Harrenhal while a separate force kept watch for any Tyrell invasion from the south. It was a patchwork plan, reliant on quick movement and uncertain loyalties. The shadow of civil war loomed in every corridor of the Red Keep. Jaime Lannister, in the meantime, languished in captivity, facing a near-certain death sentence. Cersei rarely left her chambers except under guard. Joffrey fumed, demanding to be freed, to be recognized as king, but no one heeded him. Myrcella and Tommen clung to each other in fear, uncertain of their fate. Occasionally, Ned visited them, torn by pity for these children who had no say in their parentage. One late afternoon, Ned found himself summoned urgently by a messenger. Word had arrived from the Rose Road. Renly Baratheon was marching north with a grand host of Tyrell banner men, rumored at 20,000 strong, carrying bright green banners stamped with golden roses interspersed with the stag of Baratheon. They aimed to sweep through the Reach, pick up additional Stormland houses that favored Renly, and head straight for King's Landing. At the same time, Tywin Lannister's army was rumored to be on the move from Harrenhal, seeking to link with a smaller Lannister force out of the Westerlands so as to encircle the city. Two armies, both potentially hostile to Stannis' rule, threatened to converge on the Crownlands like wolves. Ned brought the news to the War Council. Stannis turned a dark scowl on the map. Renly wants to displace me by force, it seems. Or coerce me into bending the knee. I will do neither. We must strike him before he unites all the Reach. Ser Davos coughed. Your Grace, that might mean taking our army away from the city. Are we prepared to leave the Lannisters behind us? Stannis' brow furrowed. We must rely on the walls of King's Landing and the Gold Cloaks to hold the city if Tywin attempts a swift assault. Lord Stark, you will remain as Castellan in my absence if I ride south. Ned swallowed. Command of King's Landing was no small responsibility, especially with the Queen and her children captive. But if Stannis rode out with the bulk of the army, Ned was the logical choice to maintain the city's defenses. As you command, Your Grace. I will do my utmost to keep the city. Stannis nodded. Good. Edmure Tully will accompany me with his Riverland knights. Ser Davos, you will command the fleet and guard the Blackwater. I will leave a significant garrison to hold the walls. In a fortnight, I can meet Renly somewhere near Bitterbridge. If I defeat him, the Tyrells may lose heart. Thus the grim plan took shape. Over the next few days, wagons rumbled through the gates, men-at-arms mustered in the outer yards, and armorers hammered from dawn till dusk forging new blades. Stannis prepared to ride forth with perhaps 15,000 men, Stormlanders, Riverlanders, Crownlanders, and a handful from the Vale who had trickled in. It was a precarious force, but he hoped speed and surprise might outweigh Renly's numerical advantage. Meanwhile, King's Landing would remain in Ned's hands with a garrison of about 5,000 to guard the walls. They had ample provisions for a siege if it came to that. Before departing, Stannis stood in the throne room in front of the Iron Throne, wearing full battle regalia. Ned was there, Sansa and Arya peeking from behind columns along with many others, lords, knights, and courtiers. The fiery light of morning streamed through the windows. Stannis addressed them in a clipped tone, every word carrying a steely weight. I go to secure my throne from those who would usurp it, yes, even if it is my own brother. Know this, I do so for the good of the realm, lest it fall into anarchy. Lord Stark remains in charge here as Hand of the King and Castellan of King's Landing. Obey him as you would me. The false queen and her vile brother shall remain imprisoned. If Tywin Lannister comes, Lord Stark has my leave to do whatever is necessary to hold the city. Then Stannis turned to Ned, resting a hand on his shoulder. It was an awkward gesture from a man so lacking in warmth, but it carried significance. Lord Stark, I charge you to keep my city. If the worst befalls us in the field, you are this realm's last line of defense against the wolves in the west and the serpents in the south. Ned bowed his head. I swear to do my duty, Your Grace. With that, the horns sounded outside, and Stannis strode from the Red Keep to lead his men out the gates. Ned watched from the battlements as the columns marched away, banners fluttering, hooves clattering on cobblestone. Fear churned in his gut. War was upon them in earnest. If Stannis triumphed, they might yet preserve the realm under rightful rule. If he fell, King's Landing would be beset on all sides. A day later, the city was quieter and uneasy calm after the army's departure. Ned made the rounds, inspecting the defenses, ensuring the watch was vigilant, confirming the stockpiles of grain. He visited the dungeons to check on the Lannister prisoners, found them seething but still physically unharmed. Jaime sneered at him. Cersei's eyes burned with loathing. Joffrey was sullen, refusing to speak. Myrcella and Tommen clung to each other, frightened. Ned left them quickly, unwilling to linger in that toxic atmosphere. He found a strange hush over the courtyard, so used to the bustle of men at arms. The city was braced for siege. He glimpsed Sansa wandering near the corridor leading to the stables. She offered a pale smile. "Father, is it really going to be war?" "It already is, my sweet girl," Ned replied softly. "But we can hope it ends swiftly." She nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. I once dreamed of wearing a crown, of being a queen. Now it all feels so ugly, so frightening." She looked away, cheeks flushing. "Forgive me for the silly things I said before." He laid a hand on her shoulder. "There is nothing to forgive, Sansa. You were only dreaming the dreams of a young girl." He sighed. "War is always ugly, but we must do our part to see it ended." Arya emerged from somewhere behind a cart carrying a wooden practice sword. "I'm ready, father, if the fight comes here. I've been training every day with Syrio." Ned forced a wan smile, ruffling her hair. "I hope it won't come to that, little one. But if the day does come, keep that wolf's heart strong." Days slipped by with no immediate assault. Ravens brought scattered tidings of Stannis' march. The king advanced toward Bitterbridge, where Renly was said to be gathering. Tywin's movements were less clear. Some scouts claimed he was heading north. Others said east. The tension pressed upon King's Landing like a storm cloud thickening overhead. At last, a breathless messenger galloped into the city, nearly collapsing from fatigue. He bore a torn sigil of the Stormlands and the news that Renly's forces had engaged Stannis' host south of the Mander, near a place called Summerhall's Ruins. The fighting had been fierce, with heavy losses on both sides, but it ended in stalemate. Renly had withdrawn to regroup with more Tyrell men, while Stannis withdrew north, possibly heading for the Stormlands again. Another message said that Tywin Lannister had unexpectedly turned west, perhaps responding to some threat near Riverrun. Was Robb Stark marching from the north to draw Tywin away? The rumors were conflicting, but Ned dared to hope that Tywin might be pinned, giving King's Landing a reprieve. Still, the city remained on edge. One dusk, as Ned was conferring with Ser Barristan in the Tower of the Hand, an alarm sounded. Shouts echoed outside. Ned rushed to the ramparts to see a mass of torches flickering near the distant horizon on the King's Road approach. At first, he feared Tywin had come after all. But the watchers soon reported that it was not Tywin's banners, but a large group of riders flying a white sunburst on black. The sigil of House Karstark, bannermen to Winterfell. They came with others, Umbers, Manderleys, Boltons, hundreds, perhaps thousands. The northern host had arrived, at least a portion of it led by Robb Stark himself. Ned felt a surge of conflicting emotions. His son, only 15 years old, leading men to war. It was a risk he had hoped to avoid, yet he could not deny the swell of relief that more loyal men were at hand. He quickly ordered the gates opened. The watchers called down, verifying that it was indeed the young wolf who approached. Robb was at the head of the column, flanked by his mother, Lady Catelyn, who had evidently journeyed from the Vale or Riverrun. With them were lords from the north whose faces Ned knew well: Great John Umber, Roose Bolton, Rickard Karstark, Wyman Manderley. When Ned hurried down to greet them, his heart pounded in his chest. The gates swung wide, torchlight illuminating the arrivals. Robb had grown taller since Ned had last seen him, with a more set look to his jaw, a hint of stubble. He dismounted, his features resolute, yet beneath it Ned saw the boy he had raised, searching his father's face for approval. "Father," Robb said, voice thick with emotion, before dipping his head in a sign of respect. Then he embraced Ned, a moment of shared warmth in a city grown cold with war's tension. "We came as soon as word reached us, though there was confusion about the roads." Lady Catelyn dismounted as well, eyes rimmed with weariness. "Ned," she breathed, hurrying forward. "I had to ensure our son did not ride alone. And, oh Ned, it is madness out there. Armies stirring on every side." She pressed her lips tight, as if fighting tears. "The rumors said you had seized the throne, or the city was in flames, or Tywin Lannister had hanged you. I had to see for myself." Ned's throat felt tight. "We are here, Cat. All is not well, but we endure." Behind Robb and Catelyn, the northern lords filed in, men who had marched weeks to answer the call of their liege lord. They looked around King's Landing's walls with wary eyes, distrustful of the southern sprawl. But they bowed their heads respectfully to Ned. The Great John offered a booming laugh, proclaiming how it was good to see a Stark in command of the city. Wyman Manderley looked fatigued from the journey but gracious. Roose Bolton stood quietly, pale eyes unreadable. Ned signaled to Ser Barristan. Open the city to them, provide them with lodging. The stables, the inns, anywhere we can fit them. And see they are fed. He turned back to Robb and Caitlin. Come inside, warm yourselves. There is much to discuss. They gathered in the Tower of the Hand, a place that once felt foreign to Ned, but by now it had grown as familiar as an unwanted second home. A large table was brought with a map of the realm. Light from a dozen lamps cast flickering shadows on the parchment. Ned gave Robb a brief account of all that had transpired: Robert's death, the revelation of Cersei's children as bastards, the crowning of Stannis, the war councils, the captivity of Jaime and Cersei, and the threat of Renly's alliance with the Tyrells. Robb listened intently, his eyes flicking to the map. Lady Caitlin was pale. Sansa and Arya, are they safe? She asked, voice trembling slightly. They are within the Red Keep, guarded at all times, Ned assured her. They've seen far too much, but they are safe. You may see them tonight. Cat nodded in relief. Thank the gods. Roose Bolton studied the map. So King Stannis is in the field, contending with Renly. Tywin lurks in the west, but rumors say he was drawn away. Why not seize the advantage and crush him, Lord Stark? Ned exhaled. Because it would risk leaving King's Landing open to Renly or Tywin's allies. And I will not lead a reckless campaign that sees the city sacked once again. He paused, eyeing Bolton carefully. The man had a certain calculating quality. We must defend the city, keep the realm's peace as best we can, and support Stannis where we may. That is the gist of it. But you've come a long way, and I will not demand more from you than you can provide. Robb's voice was firm. Father, we are Starks. The North stands behind you. If King Stannis is the rightful king by law, then we shall uphold that law. But we want justice for what the Lannisters did, harming Bran, nearly causing war with us. If that justice means we stand guard here against Tywin, we do so gladly. Ned felt a surge of pride. His son was stepping into manhood under the harshest circumstances. Thank you, Robb. The night wore on as they discussed strategy. The Northern Lords asked pointed questions. Great John Umber demanded the chance to face Tywin in battle. Rickard Karstark, still mourning his sons lost in earlier conflicts, seethed with anger at the Lannisters. Wyman Manderley insisted on a more diplomatic approach, not wishing to see the North drained of life. Ned tried to balance their interests. The immediate plan remained the same: hold King's Landing, keep the Lannisters from retaking it, and wait for word from Stannis. Lady Caitlin pressed Ned privately away from the men. Ned, are we certain Stannis is who we want on the throne? Could Renly not be reasoned with? He's more charismatic, less cold. Perhaps a compromise, eh? Ned shook his head. I've considered it, Cat. But the law is the law. Stannis is older. If we undermine the rightful claim, we open the door to endless disputes. It's not about who is kinder, it's about who has the rightful claim. Caitlin sighed. I only fear that the realm may prefer Renly's charm to Stannis's iron fist. Or might last for years. But I see your point. They parted with that heavy realization. The path was set. In the following days, Ned introduced Robb to the intricacies of city governance, the dryness of balancing the depleted coffers, the endless stream of petitions from merchants, guild masters, and foreign envoys anxious about the city's fate. Robb seemed overwhelmed, but Caitlin stepped in to help, bringing a touch of southern courtesy that Robb lacked. Arya was delighted to see her mother, throwing her arms around her in uncharacteristic abandon. Sansa wept upon seeing them, relieved to have more of her family close. The presence of the Northerners lent Ned renewed confidence. If Tywin dared to come, he would meet not just gold cloaks but the fury of the North. Yet the days stretched into weeks with no direct assault on King's Landing. Stannis's last raven reported that he was maneuvering near Storm's End, trying to outflank Renly. Renly had marched north, then turned west, as if aiming to reach King's Landing from another approach. Tywin's army, in the meantime, seemed pinned in the Riverlands by some confrontation with Stark bannermen from the north. Ned realized that must be another portion of Robb's army, led perhaps by the Blackfish or other Tully allies. So the city waited, bracing for a storm that did not break. Inside the Red Keep, tension simmered. Jaime Lannister and Cersei grew ever more desperate, while Joffrey raged like a caged animal. The daily routine of a city under siege wore on, though the siege had not begun physically. One morning, as Ned broke his fast with Robb, Lady Caitlin, and Ser Barristan, a frantic knocking came at the door. A gold cloak officer stumbled in, breathless. "My Lord Regent," he gasped. There's been an attempt to free the prisoners. Ned surged to his feet, alarm clanging through him. Explain. The officer swallowed hard. A group of men disguised as servants tried to force their way into Maegor's holdfast at dawn. Some of them had Lannister colors hidden beneath their cloaks. Our men fought them off. We lost 2 in the struggle, but the traitors were all slain or captured. Fear jolted Ned's heart. Cersei? The children? Did they? The officer bowed. They're still secure. The infiltration failed. Robb stood, hand on the hilt of his sword. Perhaps Tywin planted them long ago, or perhaps it was a local cell of Lannister loyalists. Ned nodded grimly. They would have tried to free or kill the prisoners before we could respond. Catelyn's face was pale. Thank the gods they failed. But we must increase security. Ned wasted no time. He ordered the entire keep locked down further, doubling the guards around Cersei's quarters, screening every servant who entered or left. They rounded up the captured infiltrators. Under questioning, some more gentle, some more grim, they revealed that they had been promised a fortune in gold from a mysterious benefactor if they freed the queen and her children. One admitted receiving instructions from a man with a mockingbird pin on his cloak. Littlefinger. So Baelish had not fled the city entirely. He was lurking in its shadows, stirring trouble. Or else he had corresponded from outside, ensuring chaos continued. Ned cursed Peter's duplicity. Another threat lurking, intangible as smoke. Time dragged on. The city gates remained open for trade, but heavily monitored. Ned realized that if Tywin or Renly truly wanted King's Landing, they might well starve it out eventually, but that would take time, and the city's storehouses were well stocked. No major host appeared on the horizon. Just scattered rumors of battles in the fields beyond. The realm was in chaos, but for the moment King's Landing stood. Then, near the cusp of autumn, a battered herald in Tyrell livery arrived with a white banner. Ned and the assembled lords greeted him warily in the throne room. The herald's clothes were caked with dust, and his eyes were wild with the strain of long travel. He bore a sealed letter from Renly Baratheon. Ned read it, passing each line to Robb and Catelyn as well. To Eddard Stark, so-called Hand of the King under the Pretender Stannis. I have seized command of the majority of the Reach and Stormlands. The Tyrell lords stand behind me, as do many of my brother's former bannermen who see the wisdom in placing a gracious king upon the Iron Throne. Stannis' harshness and your stubborn adherence to dead law will lead only to ruin. I offer you a chance to surrender King's Landing to me in peace. If you do so, I will pardon you and all those within. We need not drown the realm in blood. I will uphold Robert's memory and see justice done. The Lannisters can face trial, or perhaps the Wall. As for Stannis, he and I can come to terms if he relinquishes his false claim. But should you refuse, be warned, I march on the city within a moon's turn. I will not relent, and you shall be branded traitors when I take the throne. Choose wisely, Ned. I once counted you a friend to our house. Do not force me to treat you as an enemy. Renly Baratheon, the one true king. Ned stared at the words, feeling the weight of inevitability. War in the very streets. Another wave of conflict. Renly claims to be merciful, he said aloud, but he is as much an usurper in this matter as Cersei was. Stannis is the elder. The law cannot be bent simply for Renly's popularity. Robb's jaw tightened. We hold the city for Stannis. We do not yield. Lady Catelyn frowned. Is there truly no path to negotiation, Ned? Perhaps if Renly and Stannis would meet. Ned shook his head, recalling Stannis' stony insistence on his right. I have tried urging compromise, but neither side yields. Renly wants the crown for himself. Stannis demands it by law. They cannot both have it. Barristan Selmy stood quietly nearby, arms folded. We should at least attempt one more parley. If that fails, then so be it. So Ned penned a response, an invitation to Renly to meet outside the city in neutral territory, offering safe conduct for a discussion. He sealed it and handed it to the herald, who left, looking relieved to have avoided immediate imprisonment. Then Ned ordered the city's defenses heightened yet again. Robb and the northern lords readied themselves for a possible siege. The newly arrived host from the north gave King's Landing a stronger force than before, but would it be enough against the combined might of the Tyrells and Renly's portion of the Stormlands? That number might exceed 30,000. They themselves had maybe 15,000 within and around the city, plus the fortifications. Sizable, but the attacker would have advantage in the field. Another week passed. Word came that Renly was indeed approaching, perhaps 2 days' ride away, while sending an envoy to negotiate. Then, like a thunderclap, everything changed once more. A raven from the Stormlands brought horrifying news that King Stannis Baratheon had been slain in battle by a mysterious force near Blackhaven, or so the rumors claimed. Some said sorcery was involved, others that it was a normal clash, but the outcome was the same. Stannis had been struck down, his forces scattered. Many knights had fled. The Storm Lords who once followed him were in disarray. When Ned read the words, a hollow numbness spread through his chest. All that he had done, seizing the throne room, calling Stannis the rightful king, imprisoning the Lannisters, now unraveling because the lawful claimant was gone. No one knew details, only that Stannis was dead, or at least rumored so, and his men routed. The realm would surely follow those rumors, and the iron law that had once buoyed Ned's decisions now lay shattered. Renly could declare himself unopposed among Baratheon lines. Tywin might sense blood in the water. House Stark, alone in King's Landing, was now a keystone removed from its arch. That same evening, new horns sounded. From the walls, Ned and Robb beheld the torches of a vast host arrayed in the distance. Banners of the Golden Rose and the Stag quartered together fluttered in the wind, joined by countless lesser sigils of the Reach. The Watchers reported they numbered in the tens of thousands. Renly had arrived ahead of schedule, emboldened by the news of Stannis' supposed defeat, and he had come to claim the city. Ned stood upon the battlements, staring out over the flicker of the encampment. His breath was tight in his throat. "We are alone now," he said quietly to Robb. "Our only advantage is these walls." Robb squared his shoulders. "We'll hold them, father. The North remembers. We won't let them pass." Ned placed a hand on his son's shoulder, feeling the weight of every choice that had led them here. Dawn would break soon, and with it, likely the first horns of Renly's challenge. King's Landing was once again a prize on the brink of war. But now, in this changed world where Ned Stark had taken Jaime Lannister prisoner in the streets of the city months ago, everything was different. The realm spun into an even more tangled dance of ambition and honor, of bloodshed and whispered secrets. Yet Ned would not bend. He would not yield to a false king or break his vow to guard what was left of Robert's legacy. If war was coming at sunrise, so be it. He would stand with his son and his men on these walls and face the tide. And the final turn of fate, whether for peace or for ruin, would be decided not by swords alone, but by the slender thread of hope that somehow, in this storm of crowns and claims, the realm might yet find a measure of justice. Ned Stark held to that hope as fiercely as a drowning man clings to driftwood, praying that the new day would not break in the fires of utter devastation. And in the east, beyond the horizon, dawn glimmered in pale gold, as if the gods themselves waited with bated breath to see whether mercy or madness would rule the world of men.